32 Unsolved Mysteries. From the ghost ship Mary Celeste to the sky-wide Phoenix Lights, this is a soothing yet spine-tingling journey that we're about to embark on, lasting over 3 gentle hours. We'll begin with how a seaworthy brig was found drifting with breakfast still on the stove, and move deeper into why thousands watched silent lights glide over Arizona's desert night. So put your phone or television remote to the side, dim the lights, and please make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know where you are listening from in the comments. Now, let's begin. Roanoke vanishes, the lost colony. The pale winter light falls across the desolate shores of Roanoke Island, a crescent of land nestled against the outer banks of what would someday become North Carolina. The year is 1590, and the wind whispers through tall grasses as Governor John White's boots sink into the sandy soil of a place he had left 3 years before. His footsteps quicken as he approaches the settlement, anticipation mingling with a strange growing dread. His daughter and granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World, wait somewhere beyond the tree line, or so he hopes. White had not meant to abandon them for so long. He had sailed to England for supplies in 1587, leaving behind 115 colonists with promises of a swift return. But war with Spain had detained him. Ships requisitioned for battle against the Armada, permissions denied, and passage delayed season after season while the settlement faded into silence across the Atlantic. 3 winters had passed since he had held his granddaughter in his arms. The palisade comes into view through the trees. White's steps falter. The wooden fortifications stand intact, but the gate hangs open, swinging slightly in the coastal breeze. No smoke rises from within. No voices call out in greeting. The settlement lies as quiet as the surrounding wilderness. White calls out, his voice carried away by the indifferent wind. Only the distant cry of seabirds answers. Inside the walls, grass has begun to reclaim the packed earth between cabins. Doorways stand open to empty interiors. Hearths hold only cold ash. Personal belongings, combs, cups, a child's wooden toilet abandoned, as if their owners had stepped away for but a moment and never returned. No signs of struggle mark the ground. No bodies lie in silent testimony to violence. The colony has not been destroyed, it is simply emptied. White orders his men to search every structure, every corner of the palisade. They find only one clue, letters carved into a post-Crow, and on a nearby tree, the letters Crow, as if the carver had been interrupted. White remembers his instructions to the colonists. Should they move, they were to carve their destination, and if under duress, they were to add a cross. There is no cross. Perhaps they had gone voluntarily to Croatoan Island, home of friendly indigenous allies some 50 miles south. A storm gathers on the horizon. White's ship, anchored offshore, must weigh anchor or risk destruction against the shoals. He pleads for time to sail to Croatoan Island, but the captain refuses. Winter approaches, supplies dwindle. They must return to England now or not at all. With the promise of a return expedition that would never materialize, White leaves Roanoke for the last time, the fate of his family and the other colonists an open wound that would never heal. What happened to the lost colonists of Roanoke? The whispers of possibility have echoed through centuries. Perhaps they sought refuge with the Croatoan people, gradually intermarrying and assimilating until their English origins faded into legend. Some later explorers reported encountering indigenous people with grey eyes who could read English books, who spoke of ancestors who came from across the water. Or perhaps they attempted to relocate to the Chesapeake Bay, their original intended destination, traveling inland along waterways only to meet with disaster. Drought had gripped the region during those yearly ring studies reveal the worst dry spell in 8 centuries. Crops may have failed, water sources dried up, starvation claiming lives one by one. Others suggest the colonists split into smaller groups, some heading south to Croatoan, others north toward the Chesapeake, still others seeking shelter with the Chowanoke or other indigenous nations of the interior. Archaeological evidence remains scant, though artifacts occasionally surface. A signet ring here, a gunlock there, tantalizing breadcrumbs leading nowhere certain. The Spanish, who maintained settlements in Florida and considered English colonies an encroachment, may have discovered and destroyed the relocated settlement. Spanish records mention an attack on a foreign outpost around 1590, though details remain murky, lost in imperial archives. And then there are darker theories. Conflict with indigenous peoples whose patience with the English settlers had worn thin, disease that swept through the colony leaving too few survivors to maintain it, perhaps even cannibalism in the face of desperate hunger, a taboo possibility that historians discuss in hushed tones. As twilight falls over Roanoke Island even now, centuries later, one can almost hear the ghostly echoes of those vanished voices. Children's laughter silenced, conversations interrupted mid-sentence, lives suspended between one moment and the next, leaving behind only abandoned dwellings beside the restless Atlantic surf. The first permanent English settlement in the New World became instead a permanent Mysteria collection of lives that walked into the mists of history and never emerged again, leaving behind only a single word carved in wood: Croatoan. Mary Celeste, a ship adrift. The Dei Gratia, a small merchant brigantine, sliced through the Atlantic waves on December 4, 1872, its crew scanning the horizon through brass telescopes. The winter sea was temperamental but navigable as they made their way toward Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse squinted against the low winter sun, his experienced eyes catching an anomaly in the distant water vessel moving strangely, its sails partly set but flapping awkwardly, as if no hand guided its canvas. As the Dei Gratia drew alongside, Morehouse recognized the vessel with a start. It was the Mary Celeste, a ship he knew well, having dined with its captain Benjamin Briggs in New York just 8 days before their respective departures. The Mary Celeste had left New York on November 7, bound for Genoa with a cargo of industrial alcohol. The Dei Gratia had departed 8 days later on the same route. By all calculations, the Mary Celeste should have been far ahead, perhaps already approaching the Mediterranean. First mate Oliver Deveau led a boarding party across the choppy waters. The Mary Celeste rode unnaturally high in the water, rolling heavily with each wave. The boarding ladder had been removed, forcing Deveau to climb up the side. What he found upon the deck would become maritime legend. The ship was utterly deserted, yet in good seaworthy condition. No signs of violence or struggle marred the vessel. The cargo hold remained intact. 6 months' worth of food and fresh water waited in the stores. Below deck, the scene grew more perplexing. In the captain's cabin, Briggs's belongings lay undisturbed. His navigational instruments remained in place, except for the sextant and chronometer. A child's melodeon sat silent beside small boots. Briggs had brought his wife Sarah and 2-year-old daughter Sophia aboard for the voyage. In the galley, breakfast preparations appeared to have been interrupted. A pot of coffee, now ancient and congealed, remained on the cold stove. The crew's personal items, pipes, boots, oilskins waited patiently for owners who would never return. The Mary Celeste's compass had been dismantled, its glass cracked. The ship's only lifeboat was missing. Most puzzling of all, the ship's papers and logbook were gone, though the captain's private log remained, its final entry from 9 days earlier, noting their position near the Azores. One of the ship's pumps had been disassembled, and the main hatch cover had been removed and placed alongside the hold. Captain Morehouse ordered a skeleton crew to sail the ghost ship to Gibraltar, where Admiralty proceedings would attempt to make sense of the vessel's abandonment. The Mary Celeste had carried 7 seasoned sailors besides Captain Briggs and his family-ten souls in total, now vanished from the face of the earth. The ship's cargo of 701 barrels of industrial alcohol remained largely intact, though 9 barrels were found empty when examined in port. The Gibraltar hearings produced more questions than answers. The Mary Celeste had weathered a brief storm after passing the Azores, but had sustained no significant damage. The hold contained 3.5 feet of water concerning but hardly catastrophic for a wooden vessel. The ship's chronological log ended 9 days before discovery, showing no indication of emergency or distress. Frederick Solly Flood, Advocate General handling the case, initially suspected foul play, perhaps a mutiny, the crew murdering the captain and his family before fleeing in the lifeboat. But the absence of blood or signs of violence undermined this theory. The Dei Gratia's crew claimed salvage rights, but suspicion fell upon them as well. Had they encountered the Mary Celeste earlier, murdered its occupants, and concocted the abandonment story? The court found no evidence of such a crime, but suspicions lingered, reducing the salvage award significantly. What phantom terror could have driven 10 people to abandon a seaworthy vessel in the open Atlantic? Theories multiplied like barnacles on a hull. Perhaps the alcohol cargo had leaked, creating explosive fumes that panicked the crew into temporary evacuation. 9 empty barrels were found, their contents possibly evaporated through porous wood rather than leaked. Did Briggs order everyone into the lifeboat, tethered to the Mary Celeste by a rope that subsequently broke in rough seas? Others suggested an encounter with a waterspout or rogue wave, temporarily flooding the deck and triggering fears of imminent sinking. The disassembled pump and open hatch suggest the crew had been checking for water in the hold. A Seaquake submarine earthquake might have violently rocked the ship, convincing those aboard that structural damage was imminent. More fanciful explanations emerged as decades passed. Pirate attack, though nothing valuable was taken. Giant squid assault, pulling crew members into the depths. Collective madness from contaminated food. Even alien abduction in later retellings. Each theory withers under scrutiny, yet none can be definitively disproven. The Mary Celeste sailed on after the Gibraltar hearings, passing through 13 different owners over the next 12 years, dogged by misfortune and its ghostly reputation. In 1885, it was deliberately wrecked off Haiti as part of an insurance fraud, ending its troubled journey. But the mystery of those missing 10 souls remains unresolved, their fate unknown, their final moments unrecorded. In the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, sailors still speak of a phantom brigantine that sometimes appears on the horizon, its sails half set, moving without purpose or destination across the endless Atlantic. Aboard, a silent compass swings in an empty cabin, pointing not north, but towards some unknown truth that awaits discovery, truth that may lie forever beyond human reach. Like the crew of the Mary Celeste themselves. Cryptic pages, the Voynich manuscript. In the temperature-controlled vault of Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library lies an unassuming volume bound in plain vellum, its pages browned with age. Catalogued as MS 408, this modest codex defies every attempt at understanding. The Voynich manuscript, named for the Polish book dealer Wilfrid Voynich, who purchased it in 1912, presents perhaps the most enduring cipher known to humanity, a book written in an unknown script, depicting impossible plants and explaining something that 5 centuries of scholarship has failed to decipher. The manuscript contains approximately 240 pages of text and illustrations, though some have been lost to time. Carbon dating places the vellum's creation between 1404 and 1438, during the late medieval period. The pages are filled with flowing text, in an alphabet found nowhere else on Earth, not in any known historical document, not in any recognized language. The letters appear to have been written confidently, without hesitation or correction, as if the scribe were transcribing a language as natural to them as breathing. Alongside this inscrutable text are hundreds of illustrations, primarily of botanical specimens that botanists cannot identify. Plants with impossible structures or roots becoming leaves, stems flowing into flowers that could not exist in nature, rendered in green, blue, and reddish-brown inks. Other sections feature astronomical or astrological diagrams, concentric circles filled with stars or female figures bathing in interconnected pools of green-tinted water. Pharmaceutical drawings show tiny plant parts beside vessels that resemble alchemical equipment. A cosmological section displays what might be celestial bodies, or perhaps microscopic circular forms nested within each other like Russian dolls, connected by channels or pathways that follow no known scientific principle. The manuscript's known history begins with Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who purchased it around 1600 for the considerable sum of 600 ducats, believing it to be the work of the 13th century philosopher Roger Bacon. A letter discovered with the manuscript, dated 1665, claimed it had been sent to Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher by Johannes Marcus Marci, rector of Prague University. who inherited it from an unnamed friend. The manuscript then disappeared until 1912, when Voynich discovered it among a collection of ancient manuscripts at the Villa Mondragone near Rome. Cryptographers have attacked the Voynich text with every tool at their disposal. Statistical analyses reveal patterns consistent with natural language. It follows Zipf's law, which describes the frequency distribution of words in human communication. The text shows repeating sequences and consistent word structures, with particular words appearing at the beginnings and ends of paragraphs, like natural linguistic markers. Yet it matches no known language family. If it is a cipher, it is exponentially more complex than any other medieval code. The strange flora depicted throughout the botanical section has led some scholars to suggest the manuscript originated in the New World, documenting plants unknown to European botany. Others propose it records medicinal knowledge from a lost culture or esoteric tradition. The astronomical sections could represent a cosmology entirely separate from mainstream European thought, perhaps preserving knowledge from Cathar heretics or other persecuted groups who hid their teachings in plain sight through elaborate encoding. William Friedman, the legendary cryptographer who broke Japan's Purple Code during World War II, spent decades attempting to crack the Voynich cipher without success. Modern computational linguistics has fared no better. In 2019, researchers claimed to have identified the language as medieval Hebrew, written in an elaborate code, but other scholars quickly disputed this conclusion. AI algorithms trained on multiple languages have produced various translations that ultimately proved inconsistent and unconvincing. Some dismiss the manuscript as an elaborate hoax, perhaps created by John Dee, the Elizabethan mathematician and occultist, or even by Voynich himself to increase its value. Yet the carbon dating firmly places the vellum in the early 15th century, and the inks appear consistent with that period. The effort required to create such an elaborate fake writing, hundreds of pages in a consistent, invented language with internal linguistic patterns, would be extraordinary for any era, particularly for medieval scribes. Others suggest the text represents glossolalia, transcription of speaking in tongues, perhaps from a religious sect that believed they channeled divine or supernatural entities. The fluid writing style, without corrections or hesitations, might support this theory. Perhaps the manuscript records the visions or utterances of a mystic, faithfully transcribed by followers who believed these communications contained profound wisdom despite their incomprehensibility. The Voynich manuscript resists categorization because it exists outside our frameworks of understanding. It employs no known writing system, depicts plants that do not exist in nature, and presents cosmological models that follow no recognized scientific or mystical tradition. It is an artifact seemingly created in a parallel intellectual universe that occasionally intersected with our own. As night falls and the library lights dim, one can imagine those green-inked plants continuing to grow on their vellum pages, blooming in a garden that exists only in dreamland. The feminine figures still bathe in their strange pools, moving through cycles of celestial influence we cannot comprehend. The text continues its silent communication, perhaps waiting for the right decoder, the right algorithm, or perhaps simply content in its Mysteria book that has accomplished the remarkable feat of remaining completely unread for over 500 years, despite being examined by the world's greatest minds. The Voynich manuscript reminds us that not all mysteries can be solved, that some knowledge may be permanently lost or exist in forms we cannot access. It stands as a humbling testament to the limits of human understanding, a book that reads us more effectively than we can read it, revealing our assumptions, our intellectual frameworks, and ultimately, our capacity for wonder in the face of the truly unknown. Flight MH3 170 disappears in empty sky. In the hushed pre-dawn darkness of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 taxied toward the runway at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The Boeing 777-200ER carried 227 passengers and 12 crew members, most settling in for the overnight journey to Beijing. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot with 365 flight hours, exchanged routine pleasantries with air traffic control. First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid made his final cockpit checks. At 12:41 a.m. local time, the massive aircraft lifted into the night sky, its navigation lights punctuating the darkness as it climbed to cruising altitude. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. These words from Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control at 1:19 a.m. marked the last standard communication with the flight. Captain Shah's response was equally mundane. Good night. Malaysian 370. Nothing in this exchange hinted that these would be the final words heard from an aircraft about to become the center of modern aviation's most enduring mystery. At 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder ceased functioning, causing the aircraft to disappear from secondary radar. The last primary radar contact came from Malaysian military radar at 2:22 a.m., showing the aircraft over the Andaman Sea, hundreds of miles off its planned route. Then, like a ghost dissolving into mist, flight MH370 vanished from all conventional tracking systems. In the confusion that followed, hours passed before anyone realized the aircraft was truly missing. The flight had been expected to enter Chinese airspace at 2:27 a.m., but neither Malaysian nor Vietnamese controllers raised immediate alarms when it failed to make scheduled contact. Only at 7:24 a.m., nearly 6 hours after its disappearance, did Malaysia Airlines issue its first statement: the plane was missing. The initial search focused on the Gulf of Thailand, where the aircraft should have been flying. Ships and aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, China, and the United States scoured the waters, finding nothing but floating debris unrelated to the missing plane. Meanwhile, engineers at British satellite telecommunications company Inmarsat made a crucial discovery. Though MH370's communication systems had ceased functioning, the aircraft's satellite data unit had continued to respond automatically to hourly status requests from Inmarsat's satellite network. These electronic handshake-simple automated signals confirming the system remained powered created a trail of breadcrumbs leading into the void. By analyzing the slight variations in transmission frequency caused by the Doppler effect, Inmarsat's engineers determined that after disappearing from radar, the aircraft had turned sharply westward, crossing the Malay Peninsula, then turned south, flying for approximately 7 hours until a final, partial handshake at 8:19 a.m. suggested the aircraft had exhausted its fuel supply. This analysis radically shifted the search zone from the Gulf of Thailand to the vast southern Indian Ocean, one of Earth's most remote and inhospitable environments. The new search area spanned 120 square kilometers of underwater terrain, less mapped than the surface of marsubassal plains plunging to depths of 50 meters, interrupted by underwater volcanoes, ridges, and canyons. The ocean floor here remains one of the least explored places on our planet, a lightless realm of crushing pressure where human technology operates at the very limits of its capability. For 2 years, ships towing sophisticated sonar equipment methodically scanned this underwater wilderness, creating detailed maps of terrain never before seen by human eyes. The search became the largest and most expensive in aviation history, eventually costing over 150 million, yet it yielded nothing but an increased understanding of Indian Ocean bathymetry. On the eastern shores of Africa and islands in the western Indian Ocean, fragments of the aircraft began washing ashore in 2015 and 2016. A flaperon discovered on Réunion Island in July 2015 was the first piece confirmed to belong to MH370. Eventually, over 20 pieces of debris would be recovered thousands of miles from the presumed crash site, carried by ocean currents across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. These fragments a wing flap here, a piece of interior panel there are the only physical evidence that the aircraft now lies somewhere beneath the waves. What happened in those crucial moments after the final good night remains aviation's greatest riddle. The flight path reconstruction suggests deliberate human action, the transponder deactivation, the course changes, the prolonged flight southward, yet the motivation behind such actions defies easy explanation. Some investigators favor the theory of pilot suicide, pointing to Captain Shah's home flight simulator, which contained deleted files showing a route similar to MH370's presumed final path. Yet those who knew Shah describe a professional airman with no signs of psychological distress, a man who had calmly flown thousands of routine flights throughout his career. Would such a person choose this method of self-destruction, taking 238 others with him into oblivion? Others suggest hijacking or terrorism, though no group claimed responsibility, and passenger background checks revealed no concerning profiles. If terrorists had seized control, what purpose was served by flying for hours into one of Earth's emptiest regions, rather than using the aircraft as a weapon against a populated target? Technical theories propose catastrophic decompression or fire that incapacitated the crew after they initiated an emergency turn toward the nearest suitable airport in Langkawi. The aircraft, on autopilot, might have continued flying until fuel exhaustion. But this fails to explain the communications shutdown and multiple course changes that appear deliberate rather than the result of systems failure. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that of hypoxia-oxygen, deprivation gradually affecting everyone aboard. In this scenario, as the cabin slowly lost pressure, cognitive impairment would have preceded unconsciousness. The pilots, making increasingly irrational decisions while believing they were responding appropriately, might have initiated the course changes before succumbing. The passengers, slipping into unconsciousness as oxygen levels fell, would have experienced little distress, unaware of their fate as the aircraft flew on, a metal sarcophagus, carrying the already dead across miles of empty ocean toward an unmarked grave. The search was officially suspended in January 2017, though private efforts continued. In 2018, Ocean Infinity conducted a new search using autonomous underwater vehicles, covering another 112 square kilometers without success. The aircraft's main wreckage, the fuselage, engines and black boxes that might finally tell the story of those final hours, remains undiscovered. Somewhere in the deep Indian Ocean, beyond sunlight's reach, MH370 rests in darkness. Fish swim through cabin spaces where passengers once sat. Currents flow past instrument panels that once guided the aircraft through night skies. The cockpit voice recorder, if intact, holds 2 hours of conversation that no human has heard final words, explanations perhaps, or simply the ambient sounds of an aircraft in flight, punctuated by the growing silence of thin air. For the families of those aboard, this absence of closure inflicts a unique form of grief. Without bodies to bury or a definitive explanation, many cannot fully process their loss. They gather on anniversaries, holding photos of those who boarded a routine flight and vanished into history. They still search faces in crowds, still start at phone rings from unknown numbers, still wake from dreams where loved ones have simply been delayed, not lost. As technology advances and deep-sea exploration capabilities improve, perhaps someday the wreckage will be found, the recorders recovered, the final chapter of MH370 written. Until then, the disappeared aircraft joins history's catalogue of enduring mysteries, a modern Flying Dutchman, drifting through an endless sea of theories and questions. Its cabin lights faded into the infinite blue of the southern Indian Ocean. Fire over Siberia, the Tunguska event. The Evenki reindeer herders woke to an ordinary June morning in the taiga forest of central Siberia. The date was June 30, 1908, and for the indigenous people scattered across this vast wilderness, it promised to be like any other summer day, tending to reindeer, fishing the clear rivers that wound through endless stretches of larch and pine, living as their ancestors had for centuries beneath the expansive Siberian sky. None could have anticipated that within hours, their world would be transformed by an event so catastrophic that it would remain unexplained for more than a century. At approximately 7:17 a.m., the skies split open. Witnesses as far as 300 miles away described a brilliant blue-white light moving across the heavens, brighter than the sun itself. Then came the explosiona, sound like artillery fire, magnified 1,000-fold, audible from 620 miles away. A column of fire rose into the atmosphere, culminating in an eruption that flattened approximately 80 million trees across 20 square kilometers of dense forest. The shockwave circled the planet twice. Atmospheric pressure anomalies were recorded by barographs in England. For several nights afterward, the skies over Europe and western Russia glowed with an eerie luminescence, bright enough to read by at midnight in some locations. In the epicenter, temperatures briefly reached 0 degrees Celsius 3 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Trees directly beneath the blast were not merely knocked down but stripped of their branches and bark, standing like ghostly telegraph poles pointing outward from ground zero. Further out, entire swathes of forest lay flat, trees aligned like matchsticks dropped from a great height, all pointing away from the blast center. Reindeer herds were decimated, their charred bodies scattered among the smoldering trees. Those Evenki encamped closest to the epicenter were thrown into the air by the shock wave, some sustaining serious injuries, others reporting mysterious skin lesions resembling severe sunburn in the blast's aftermath. Yet, for all its apocalyptic force, the Tunguska event occurred in one of the most remote regions on Earth. In 1908, central Siberia remained largely inaccessible, its vast territories mapped only in the crudest terms. The nearest settlement of any size, Vanavara trading post, lay 40 miles from the epicenter. The Russian Empire, already struggling with internal political tensions that would culminate in revolution 9 years later, paid little attention to reports of a distant explosion in the wilderness. Not until 1927 would the first scientific expedition, led by Leonid Kulik, reach the site to document the devastation. What Kulik expected to find was a meteorite crater. What he discovered instead deepened the mystery. Despite the radial pattern of flattened trees clearly indicating an explosion originating from above, no crater marked the landscape. No significant fragments of meteoritic material were recovered despite extensive searching. The blast had occurred approximately 5 to 10 kilometers above the Earth's surface, leaving behind only the enigmatic pattern of destruction below. The absence of a crater, or substantial meteoric remains, has fueled over a century of scientific debate and speculation. The most widely accepted explanation today involves a small asteroid or comet fragment, perhaps 50-60 meters in diameter, entering Earth's atmosphere at supersonic speed. As it penetrated the thicker layers of atmosphere, the immense pressure on its leading surface caused the object to disintegrate explosively before it could strike the ground and airburst, rather than an impact event. If the object was a comet fragment, composed largely of ice and dust, it would have vaporized almost completely in the explosion, explaining the lack of remnants. Microscopic silicate and magnetite spheres found in the soil near the epicenter support this theory, as do elevated levels of iridium and other elements commonly found in meteorites. The pattern of tree fall, with a butterfly wing shape rather than a perfect circle, suggests the object approached at an angle of approximately 30 degrees from the southeast. Yet alternative theories persist. Soviet scientist Alexander Kazantsev proposed in 1946 that Tunguska marked the explosion of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, perhaps a nuclear-powered vessel that malfunctioned while approaching Earth. This speculation, while popular in science fiction, finds little support among mainstream scientists. More exotic scientific hypotheses include a micro-black hole passing through Earth, its brief passage releasing enormous energy, a chunk of antimatter from space contacting ordinary matter in the atmosphere, or a sudden release of natural gas from the Earth's crust, ignited by electrical discharge. Some have even suggested experiments by Nikola Tesla with wireless energy transmission might have inadvertently caused the explosion, though historical records place Tesla in New York during this period. For the Evenki people, the explanation was spiritual rather than scientific. Many believed the explosion represented the return of Ogdi, their god of thunder, punishing them for their wickedness. The area surrounding the epicenter became taboo, avoided by local inhabitants who reported strange mutations in plants and animals, mysterious illnesses, and accelerated growth of vegetation in subsequent years. Modern analysis estimates the Tunguska explosion released energy equivalent to approximately 12 megatons of TNT, about 800 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Had such an object detonated above a major European city rather than the Siberian wilderness, the death toll would have reached into the millions. This sobering realization has spurred increased interest in near-Earth object detection and planetary defense strategies. What makes Tunguska uniquely haunting is its liminal quality, an event of catastrophic scale that occurred just at the threshold of modern scientific documentation. Had it happened a decade later, photographic evidence might exist. A decade earlier, it might have faded into folklore entirely. Instead, it occupies a twilight realm between verified history and enduring mystery. Today, the forest has reclaimed much of the blast zone. Trees grown since the event stand tall among the occasional preserved remnants of their flattened ancestors. Mosses and lichens cover the scorched earth. Birdsong fills the air where once there was only the roar of cosmic violence. Yet something about this place remains forever changed, a wound in the landscape that has healed on the surface, while its deeper nature remains unresolved. The hush of the larch forest now swallows the echoes of that century-old explosion, much as the vastness of Siberia absorbed the event itself, containing its devastation within wilderness rather than civilization. In the quiet shadows beneath the new growth, the unanswered questions linger like morning mist, reminders that even in our age of scientific certainty, mysteries can fall from the sky, leaving behind destruction with no signature, violence with no clear perpetrator, and questions that may never find their answers in the endless taiga stretching toward the horizon. A cryptic corpse, the Somerton Man. In the soft light of an Australian summer morning, the 1st of December, 1948, a body was discovered on Somerton Beach near Adelaide. The man lay against the seawall, legs extended toward the water, head resting on the embankment as if merely gazing at the stars. His posture suggested repose rather than distress, one arm loosely draped across his chest, the other by his side. He was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit despite the beachside setting, his polished shoes positioned oddly, as though placed rather than worn. When authorities examined his pockets, they found an aluminum comb, a half-empty pack of juicy fruit gum, cigarettes, matches, and a railway ticket to Henley Beach that had never been used. No wallet, no identification, no loose change, nothing to suggest who this man might be or why his journey had ended on these shores. The autopsy revealed little. A healthy man in his 40s with broad shoulders and well-maintained hands, suggesting physical refinement. The pathologist noted unusual musculature in his toes and feet, reminiscent of a ballet dancer or someone who regularly wore high-heeled boots. His last meal had been a pasty, still undigested in his stomach. The cause of death remained elusive, though poisoning was suspected. His spleen engorged, his blood pooled unnaturally, yet no known toxin was identified. Months later, a hidden pocket was discovered in the man's trousers. Inside lay a scrap of paper torn from a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, bearing only 2 words, Tamam Shud, Persian for "it is ended." When police issued a public appeal, the book from which the page had been torn mysteriously surfaced, surrendered by a man who claimed to have found it on his car seat around the time of the Somerton man's death. The book contained what appeared to be a coded message, faint indentations of seemingly random letters penciled inside the back cover. Wergo bad milio, wabimpenet milioboic, itemsum scab. These 5 lines of text have confounded intelligence agencies and amateur sleuths alike for decades. Were they a suicide note? Espionage instructions, a lover's cipher, they remain unbroken to this day. Post-war Adelaide was not immune to Cold War paranoia. The Woomera rocket range lay just hours away, testing British missiles in the desert. The presence of an unidentifiable man with possible Russian characteristics sparked whispers of Soviet espionage. The lack of dental records matching Australian systems, the European cut suit with impeccable stitching, and the rare book linked to the case all hinted at foreign origins. Witnesses recalled seeing the man the previous evening, slumped in the same spot but moving occasionally, as if intoxicated. One claimed to have seen another person standing over him before walking away. A suitcase believed to belong to him was later discovered at Adelaide railway station, containing clothes with labels removed, a table knife altered into a sharp tool, and thread matching that used to repair his trousers. A name written on some items, T. Keane, proved another dead end. For decades, the case remained cold until DNA technology offered new possibilities. In 2022, researchers announced that DNA extracted from hair samples suggested the man may have been Carl Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne with a troubled marriage. Yet questions linger. Why was he in Adelaide? Why the coded message? Why remove identifying marks from his clothes if he wasn't concealing his identity? The mystery has seeped into Australian culture, inspiring novels, poems, operas, and endless speculation. Some believe he was a displaced person from post-war Europe, others that he was a spy caught in a game beyond his depth, or perhaps a scorned lover who chose a poetic end by the sea. As night falls over Somerton Beach today, the gentle waves of Gulf St. Vincent still wash upon shores that once cradled this enigmatic visitor. The tide erases footprints just as time has erased certainties, leaving only whispers carried on the salt breeze. Who was this man who came to rest by the sea, carrying only a poet's final words? Island of Rumours, the Oak Island Treasure Pit. In the summer of 1795, 3 teenagers rowing through Mahone Bay spotted something unusual on Oak Island, an old ship's pulley hanging from an oak branch above a circular depression in the ground. Daniel McGuinness, John Smith, and Anthony Vaughan were familiar with tales of pirates who once haunted these Nova Scotian shores. Their discovery sparked what would become the longest treasure hunt in recorded history, an obsession spanning more than 2 centuries that has claimed both fortunes and lives. The boys began to dig, their shovels striking flagstones just 2 feet down. Beneath these stones lay a shaft lined with timbers. Every 10 feet they encountered a platform of oak logs. At 30 feet, their excitement peaked when they found a stone inscribed with symbols, later allegedly translated as 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. But as they reached 90 feet, water began flooding the pit, forcing them to abandon their efforts. This flooding wasn't mere misfortune. Later, excavations discovered an ingenious system of flood tunnels extending from the pit to Smith's Cove, designed to protect whatever lay below from unwelcome recovery attempts. These tunnels were lined with coconut fibre, materials entirely foreign to Nova Scotia, and constructed with remarkable engineering precision. 5 stone drains arranged in a feeder system formed a perfect 5-pointed star. Who would create such elaborate protections, and for what treasure? The theories are as numerous as the excavation attempts. Some believe it holds Captain Kidd's plunder, buried on orders from the dying pirate. Others point to Blackbeard, who boasted of hiding his greatest treasure where none but Satan and myself can find it. More elaborate speculations suggest Marie Antoinette's jewels secreted away during the French Revolution, or the lost manuscripts of Shakespeare, or even the Holy Grail and Ark of the Covenant, hidden by Knights Templar fleeing persecution. Over the centuries, increasingly sophisticated operations have attempted to solve the mystery. In 1804, the Onslow Company reached the 90-foot mark, only to face the same flooding. They found traces of gold and coconut fibre in their drilling samples. In 1849, the Truro Company discovered a cement vault apparently containing metal objects. Franklin D. Roosevelt himself joined an expedition in 1909 as part of the Old Gold Salvage Group, developing a lifelong fascination with the island's secrets. The hunt has been as deadly as it is alluring. 6 lives have been claimed in pursuit of the treasure, fulfilling a purported curse that 7 must die before the island reveals its secrets. Marty and Rick Lagina's modern-day expedition, chronicled in the television series The Curse of Oak Island, has employed ground-penetrating radar, seismic testing, and advanced drilling techniques to reveal tantalizing fragments, a 17th-century Spanish coin, scraps of parchment, bits of ancient chain, and traces of gold. In 2016, a 500-year-old brooch containing a high-grade garnet was discovered. Metal detected at depths previously inaccessible has renewed hope. Yet definitive proof of what exactly lies beneath remains elusive. Each answered question seems to birth two more mysteries. The most compelling evidence may be the flood tunnels themselves, their sophisticated design suggesting resources and engineering knowledge beyond common pirates. The coconut fiber, carbon dated to approximately 1400 AD, predates Columbus's voyages to the New World. Some researchers now believe the site may have been created by European explorers who reached North America long before official history acknowledges. Today, the island bears the scars of countless excavations. Pits, shafts, and tunnels honeycomb its interior. The original money pit's exact location has been lost amid hundreds of boreholes. Yet the mystery endures, whispering through the stands of aged oak trees that still guard whatever secrets remain. As evening mists rise from the surrounding waters, one can almost hear the tidal waters gurgling into the dark shafts below, nature's patient guardians continuing their centuries-old vigil over one of history's most enduring enigmas, where fortune and frustration remain separated by mere feet of impenetrable earth. A phantom hijacker, D.B. Cooper's Leap. On Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a nondescript man in his mid-40s boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He wore a business suit, black tie, and carried a briefcase. He ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Thinking it contained the phone number of a lonely businessman, she slipped it unread into her pocket. "Miss," he said quietly, "you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note demanded $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills and 4 parachutes. He opened his briefcase enough to reveal what appeared to be a battery and red cylinders. The man who bought his ticket under the name Dan Cooper, later misreported by the press as D.B. Cooper, had just initiated the only unsolved hijacking in American aviation history. When the Boeing 727 landed in Seattle, Cooper released the 36 passengers in exchange for the money and parachutes. He kept several crew members aboard and made specific demands. The plane should fly toward Mexico City at minimum speed with landing gear down, wing flaps at 15 degrees, cabin unpressurized, and the rear staircase extended. The aircraft took off again into darkening skies and driving rain. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, over the dense evergreen forests of the Cascade Mountains, Cooper did something unprecedented. He lowered the rear stairs of the aircraft and jumped into the night, into freezing temperatures, 200 mile-per-hour winds, and one of the most inhospitable terrains in America. The time was approximately 8:13 p.m. The altitude was about 10,000 feet. The ground temperature was near freezing with a wind chill far below. He wore only his business suit and a raincoat. The crew didn't realize he had gone until they landed in Reno for refueling. Cooper had vanished with the equivalent of $1.3 million in today's money, leaving behind only 2 parachutes, his tie, and a mother-of-pearl tie clip. What followed was one of the most extensive manhunts in FBI history. Aircraft equipped with infrared sensors scoured the projected drop zone. Hundreds of ground searchers combed dense forest. Agents interviewed countless witnesses and investigated over 800 suspects. The case file grew to more than 60 volumes. No trace of Cooper, nor his body, was found. 9 years later, in February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging a fire pit on Tennebar, a Columbia River beach about 20 miles southwest of Cooper's theoretical landing zone. His small hands uncovered 3 packets of deteriorating $20 bills totaling $5,800, their serial numbers matching the ransom money. The discovery raised more questions than answers. How had the money traveled so far from the jump zone? Why had only a small portion of the ransom surfaced? Had Cooper survived after all? Theories about Cooper's identity and fate have multiplied over decades. Some believe he was an experienced paratrooper or smoke jumper who knew exactly what he was doing. Others are convinced he was an airline employee familiar with the Boeing 727's unique features, particularly its rear air stair that could be opened in flight. The FBI has investigated numerous suspects. Richard Floyd McCoy, who conducted a similar hijacking 4 months later, Barbara Dayton, a transgender recreational pilot, Lynn Doyle Cooper, whose niece claimed he came home injured on Thanksgiving night 1971, and Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran with parachute training. The case officially remained open until 2016, when the FBI finally redirected its resources elsewhere, though they maintain they'll investigate any physical evidence that emerges. Modern analysis suggests Cooper likely didn't survive the jump. The harsh conditions, his inappropriate clothing, and the challenging terrain would have made survival unlikely even for an experienced jumper. Yet without a body, certainty remains elusive. The legend of D.B. Cooper has permeated American culture, inspiring films, books, songs, and a folklore status as a folk hero who outsmarted the system during troubled times. His image as a gentleman bandit persists. He was polite to the flight crew, harmed no one, and pulled off what many considered impossible. Today, the Pacific Northwest forests continue their silent vigil over whatever truth remains, as cold drizzle washes over evergreen ridges that may still cradle the final secrets of the phantom who vanished into the stormy night, leaving behind only questions carried on the wind, whispers in stone, the Phaistos disk. On a summer day in 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier was excavating the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the southern coast of Crete when his team uncovered something unprecedented in the ruins of a basement room. Amid the dust and ancient debris lay a fired clay disc about 6 inches in diameter, covered on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols unlike any writing system known to archaeology. The Phaistos disc had emerged from its 3,700-year slumber to present one of history's most enduring linguistic puzzles. The disc contains 241 tokens comprising 45 distinct signs, arranged in a clockwise spiral starting from the outer edge. These pictographs were not carved but pressed into the soft clay using some form of movable type, essentially a prehistoric printing technology that wouldn't be seen again until Gutenberg's press in the 15th century CE. The symbols depict recognizable objects: a walking man, a helmeted head, a fish, an eagle, a shield, a dove, an arrow, and various tools and plants. Small diagonal lines divide the symbols into what appear to be words or phrases, 61 groups in total. What makes the Phaistos disc so frustrating to scholars is its isolation. While thousands of tablets inscribed with Linear A and Linear B scripts have been found throughout Crete, no other examples of the Phaistos script have ever been discovered. Without additional texts for comparison, decipherment efforts lack the statistical foundation that helped unlock other ancient writing systems like Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform. The disc emerged from the cultural apex of Minoan civilization around 1700 BCE, a sophisticated Bronze Age society centered around elaborate palatial complexes. The Minoans were accomplished sailors who dominated Mediterranean trade routes, creating elaborate frescoes, elegant pottery, and advanced architectural works, including Europe's first paved roads and multi-story buildings with sophisticated plumbing systems. Yet their ultimate origins and many aspects of their culture remain shrouded in mystery, much like the disc they left behind. Dozens of decipherment attempts have been proposed over the last century. Some scholars believe it contains a syllabic writing system related to Linear A, recording a religious hymn or ritual incantation. Others suggest it might be a sacred calendar, a geographical expedition record, or even a board game. One controversial theory proposes it records a prayer to the Minoan goddess of childbirth. Another suggests it documents astronomical observations. The most methodical efforts have analyzed the frequency and positioning of symbols, seeking patterns that might reveal linguistic structure. The repetition of certain sign groups suggests a natural language with recurring words or grammatical elements. Yet without knowing which language it might represent, Minoan, Mycenaean Greek, or something entirely different, these statistical approaches can only advance so far. Adding to the mystery, some scholars have questioned the disc's authenticity, suggesting it might be an elaborate archaeological forgery. However, microscopic examination of the clay and firing techniques have largely dispelled these suspicions. The disc appears genuinely ancient, though perhaps unique, possibly a ceremonial object or royal decree never intended for common use. The contexts of its discovery, in a palace basement alongside Linear A tablets and ceremonial objects, suggest importance, perhaps even sacred significance. Was it buried intentionally during some ancient crisis? Was it stored as a valued record, or simply forgotten when the palace complex was abandoned following fire or earthquake? Modern technology continues to offer new approaches. Digital imaging has revealed details of the stamps that created each symbol. Comparative analysis of ancient Mediterranean scripts has identified tantalizing similarities with Anatolian hieroglyphs and Cypro-Minoan writing. Yet the disc guards its secrets stubbornly, refusing definitive translation despite over a century of scholarly attention. For visitors to the Heraklion Archaeological Museum, where the disc now resides, there is something haunting about this silent messenger from antiquity. Its spiral pattern seems to pull the eye inward, as if drawing the viewer through a portal into Minoan thought. The symbols, a woman's head, a child, a bee, a tree, remain recognizable across millennia, yet their collective meaning eludes us. As museum lights dim in the evening hours, one can almost imagine torchlight flickering across these undeciphered symbols in their original setting, illuminating a message once clear to its creators but now suspended in time, a whisper in clay from an ancient world still waiting, after nearly 4,000 years, to be heard and understood. Nightwalkers, the Dyatlov Pass incident. In late January 1959, 10 young ski hikers departed from Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg, in the Soviet Union, bound for the northern Urals. Led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student. The group consisted primarily of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, experienced outdoor enthusiasts seeking to complete a challenging winter trek to Mount Atorton. One member fell ill and turned back. The remaining 9 continued toward what would become one of the most perplexing mysteries of the Soviet era. Their journey was meticulously documented through diaries and photographs, showing high spirits despite the harsh winter conditions. On January 31st, they reached the edge of an upland plateau and began ascending toward Kholat Syakh, a name that in the indigenous Mansi language means dead mountain. Here, they established camp on the slope rather than moving into the nearby forest, which would have provided better shelter from the winds. This seemingly illogical decision would be the first of many puzzling elements in the emerging mystery. From the recovered photographs and diary entries, we know they prepared dinner, possibly sang songs, and settled in for the night in a large tent they had erected. What happened next has confounded investigators for decades. On February 26th, after the group failed to return and send their promised telegrams, a search party discovered their abandoned tent on the slope of Kholat Syakh. The scene defied rational explanation. The tent had been cut open from the inside, as if the occupants had been desperate to escape. 9 pairs of boots and all the group's belongings remained inside. Footprints in the snow, some in socks, some barefoot, some in a single shoe, led away from the tent toward the edge of the nearby forest, approximately a mile downslope. The first 2 bodies, those of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, were found at the edge of the forest near the remains of a small fire. Both were shoeless and dressed only in underwear despite temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius. Branches in the nearby cedar tree were broken up to 18 feet high, suggesting someone had climbed it, perhaps as a lookout. The bodies of Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin were discovered at intervals between the tent and the cedar tree, positioned as if they had been attempting to return to the tent. Slobodin's skull bore a small crack that could have resulted from a fall or a blow. It took more than 2 months to locate the remaining 4 victims. In a ravine under 4 meters of snow, the bodies of Nicholas Thibault Brignolel, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, and Alexander Zolotaryov were found in a grotesque tableau. Dubinina's tongue and eyes were missing. Thibault Brignolel's skull had been crushed by an impact equivalent to a car crash. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had suffered massive chest fractures that, according to the medical examiner, would have required force similar to a car crash, yet their soft tissue was unbruised and their skin intact. Unlike their companions, these 4 victims were relatively well-dressed, having apparently taken clothes from the others. Most bizarrely, tests revealed traces of radiation on some of their clothing. The official Soviet investigation concluded that the group died from a compelling natural force, closing the case and classifying many documents related to it. The area was closed to hikers and skiers for 3 years following the incident. Theories attempting to explain the bizarre circumstances have proliferated over decades. Some suggest an avalanche forced the group to flee their tent, though the slope was not steep enough to generate a typical avalanche, and the pattern of the tent collapse doesn't match avalanche damage. Others propose katabatic winds, violent downdrafts capable of producing sudden hurricane-force gusts, could have prompted their escape if they feared their tent would blow away. More esoteric explanations include infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that can cause extreme anxiety and hallucinations, possibly created by specific wind patterns around the mountain. Soviet military involvement has been widely suspected, as the group's diaries mentioned observing orange spheres in the sky, which some interpret as rocket tests. The radiation detected on the clothing lends credence to these suspicions. Indigenous Mansi people had long avoided the mountain, considering it a place of evil. Some researchers suggest unknown natural phenomena, perhaps ball lightning or electrical atmospheric activity, might explain both the local superstitions and the group's panicked departure. A 2019 Russian investigation officially attributed the tragedy to an avalanche and poor visibility conditions, but many researchers remain unsatisfied with this explanation, which fails to account for numerous anomalies in the evidence. Regardless of the cause, the final moments of these 9 young lives remain frozen in the imagination. A midnight scene of sudden terror, desperate flight across snow in inadequate clothing, frigid darkness, and final struggles that left inexplicable injuries. Today, a monument stands in Mikhailov Cemetery in Yekaterinburg, 9 granite slabs representing the lost hikers. In winter, the aurora sometimes dances above the pass now bearing Dyatlov's name. Silent curtains of light sweeping over snow-silenced cairns that mark one of the 20th century's most enduring mysteries, 9 lives extinguished by unknown forces on a cold mountain that keeps its secrets beneath the Comorindes. Russian stars. Deep sea riddle, the Antikythera mechanism. In the spring of 1901, when the Mediterranean still held its ancient secrets close, Greek sponge divers anchored near the island of Antikythera. The captain, Dimitrios Kontos, gestured toward the deep blue waters. A young diver named Elias Stadiatis descended into the depths, his heavy copper helmet and canvas suit, the only barrier between life and the crushing pressure below. What he encountered there wasn't the sponge bed they sought, but a graveyard of marble and bronze, a shipwreck frozen in time since before the birth of Christ. Upon resurfacing, Stadiatis spoke of horses scattered across the seabed. The statues, green with age and encrusted with the sea's slow patience, seemed to be running across a meadow that had been underwater for 2 millennia. The archaeologists who later examined the wreck's treasures found something far more puzzling than statues, a calcified lump that later cracked open to reveal an intricate arrangement of bronze gears, wheels within wheels, teeth meshing with impossible precision. For decades, this mechanism slumbered in museum drawers, its complexity beyond the grasp of early 20th century archaeology. Who would look for computer-like precision in an era thought to be dominated by marble columns and clay amphora? The Mediterranean kept this secret, even after giving it up from her depths. Not until the 1970s did researchers begin to understand what they had found, and not until the 21st century did they truly see it for what it was. Modern X-ray tomography, peering through corrosion with digital eyes, revealed layer upon layer of mathematical perfection. 30 interlocking bronze gears, each tooth hand-filed by a craftsman who understood the poetry of celestial mechanics. Dials tracked the sun, the moon in its elliptical dance, even the wandering planets known to ancient eyes. One dial predicted eclipses with unerring accuracy. Another followed the 4-year cycle of athletic competitions, including the Olympic Games. The front face tracked the zodiac and solar year. The back face charted lunar months, according to the Metonic cycle, 235 lunar months, fitting nearly perfectly into 19 solar years. Who made such a device? Some scholars point to the astronomer Hipparchus of Rhodes, whose mathematical models of planetary motion align with the mechanism's design. Others suggest Archimedes himself, whose legendary mechanical inventions were said to have defended Syracuse from Roman fleets. Perhaps it emerged from the school at Alexandria, where Hellenistic science flourished under the light of the ancient world's greatest library. More perplexing than its origins is the sudden technological discontinuity it represents. This was not supposed to exist, a mechanical computer from more than a century before Christ, using differential gearing that would not be reinvented until the 16th century. The astronomical knowledge encoded in its bronze wheels wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe until Copernicus and Kepler mapped the heavens again, 17 centuries later. Why was such technology lost? Perhaps the answer lies within the wreck itself, a Roman ship, likely transporting Greek treasures to the Eternal City, caught in a storm around 60 BCE. This was the era when Rome's power eclipsed Greece, when practical engineering overshadowed theoretical science. Knowledge became concentrated in fewer hands, until finally Alexandria's library burned, and with it, perhaps, the understanding needed to create such wonders again. Or maybe the mechanism was never lost at all, merely hidden from history's gaze, like so many ancient innovations. Mechanical wonders described in texts, but dismissed as exaggerations by modern scholars. Water clocks in Baghdad, astronomical computers in China, mechanical birds that sang in Byzantine palaces. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism wasn't unique, just uniquely preserved by the airless depths. The shipwreck has not yielded all its secrets. Only a third of the vessel's estimated cargo has been recovered. What else might rest beneath the sediment? More gears? More dials? The instruction manual that would finally tell us who built this astronomical computer, and why, and for whom. For now, the Aegean waters continue their quiet vigil. Blue waves rippling above the ancient wood, the marble, and perhaps the bronze still waiting to be found. Sunlight filters down, touching what human hands last touched when Rome was young and the stars were both gods and mathematical objects, waiting to be captured in metal by minds that understood both their divinity and their clockwork nature. Desert script. The Rongorongo tablets. On Easter Island, where stone sentinels have watched the Pacific horizon for centuries, firelight once danced across wooden tablets carved with mysterious symbols. The islanders called these tablets Rongorongo, to recite, to chant out. When the first European missionaries arrived in the 1860s, they found an island culture already fading like embers growing cold. The last native who could read the script had died, they were told, taking the knowledge of these strange markings to his grave. The tablets themselves, most made from the compressed wood of the Toromiro tree, a species now extinct on the island, carry rows of intricate glyphs, birds with beaked profiles, humanoid figures with upraised arms, fish, stars, sexual unions depicted with startling frankness, each symbol carved with obsidian flakes, each line reading from left to right, then turning 180 degrees to be read upside down on the next line, a writing style called reverse boustrophedon, like an ox ploughing a field back and forth across fertile soil. Most of these wooden voices fell silent forever during the island's troubled colonial period. Some were burned as firewood by missionaries who saw them as pagan artifacts. Others were buried with their owners or hidden in caves. When collectors later sought them out, islanders sometimes crafted forgeries, carving new tablets with copied symbols whose meaning they themselves didn't know. Of perhaps hundreds that once existed, only 26 authenticated Rongorongo artifacts survive today, scattered in museums from Santiago to St. Petersburg. The surviving tablets whisper different messages. Some appear to contain creation myths, others genealogies of chiefs. One, the Santiago staff, shows repeated lunar calendar glyphs. Catherine Routledge, who studied the island in 1914, met an elderly man named Capiera, who claimed the tablets contained old songs, not prayers. He demonstrated how they were read, not strictly from the symbols, but as mnemonic devices, with each glyph triggering memorized chants far longer than the carved marks themselves. This mnemonic theory has gained credence among some researchers. Perhaps Rongorongo wasn't a complete writing system, but a prompt for memory, like the string quipus of the Inca or the songlines of Aboriginal Australia, knowledge technologies that encode far more than their physical forms suggest. Others maintain it was a true writing system, perhaps the only one independently invented in Oceania, evolving in splendid isolation on the world's most remote inhabited island. Linguists and cryptographers have attempted to crack the code for over a century. Some see parallels with Indus Valley script, suggesting ancient contact across impossible distances. Others point to similar motifs in Polynesian tattoo patterns and carved designs throughout the Pacific. One theory proposes the script developed after Rapa Nui Islanders witnessed Spanish documents in 1770, when explorers had local chiefs sign a document claiming the island for Spain. Perhaps seeing writing for the first time inspired them to create their own. The glyphs themselves seem to dance between representation and abstraction, a bird that might be a frigate or a sooty tern, a figure holding what could be a club or a ceremonial oar. Plants that don't quite match any species. Were they recording natural observations or mythic events, or both simultaneously? On an island where resources gradually vanished until even the trees disappeared, perhaps Rongorongo recorded ecological knowledge that could no longer be directly observed, memories of plants and animals already gone. Carbon dating of the tablets places most between the 17th and 19th centuries, but the system itself may be far older. The oldest dated Rongorongo inscription appears on a stone cave wall, possibly from the 13th century. By the time Europeans arrived, the script was already in decline, used primarily by priestly classes and chiefs. Like so many knowledge systems faced with colonial disruption, Rongorongo couldn't survive the demographic collapse that followed Western contact, when smallpox, tuberculosis, and slave raids reduced Easter Island's population from thousands to just over 100. Today, the tablets rest in climate-controlled museum cases, their wood grain still visible beneath the glyphs. Digital imaging now reveals carving details invisible to the naked eye. Computer analysis searches for patterns, statistical frequencies, potential phonetic values, yet the tablets remain largely silent, their messages locked within circular bird heads and bent human forms. Sometimes at sunset, when shadows lengthen across Easter Island's grassy hills, one can almost hear the whisper of forgotten chants carried on the Pacific wind. The Rongorongo tablets, even in their silence, speak of human ingenuity at the far edge of the world, of a people who, finding themselves alone in the vast ocean, created their own way to make wood, remember what human memory alone could not preserve. A crater that isn't the Vela incident. On the 22nd of September, 1979, a United States Vela satellite, silently orbiting 6,000 miles above Earth, detected something unusual. Two sharp peaks of light, separated by a characteristic millisecond interval, the unmistakable signature of a nuclear detonation. The flash occurred somewhere in the remote southern Indian Ocean, near the Prince Edward Islands, between South Africa and Antarctica, yet no nation claimed responsibility. No crater was ever found. No radiation was officially detected. The Cold War world paused, waiting for confirmations that never quite materialized. American intelligence agencies suspected a collaborative test between South Africa's apartheid government and Israel, two nations with undeclared nuclear ambitions and increasingly close technical cooperation. Both countries denied involvement. The Soviet Union remained curiously silent. The South Atlantic became a sea of whispers. The Vela satellites were specifically designed to detect nuclear explosions, using optical, X-ray, and electromagnetic pulse sensors. Since their deployment in 1963, they had successfully identified dozens of known tests with perfect accuracy. The distinctive double flash was considered unmistakable, the initial fireball's brightness followed by a second, brighter flash as the fireball emerges from behind the shockwave. This signature had never produced a false positive before. Yet official investigations remained curiously ambivalent. President Jimmy Carter's administration, already struggling with the Iran hostage crisis and facing re-election, commissioned a panel of scientists to examine the evidence. They concluded that the signal was most likely caused by a meteoroid hitting the satellite, a theory many nuclear experts found implausible. The satellite's sensors had never mistaken a meteoroid impact for a nuclear test in 16 years of operation. Meanwhile, other evidence accumulated in classified files. A naval research laboratory analysis found hydroacoustic signals, underwater sound waves, consistent with a small nuclear explosion in the area. Air sampling flights detected unusual levels of iodine-131 in Australian sheep thyroids weeks later. Researchers at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico noted an anomalous traveling ionospheric disturbance moving from the suspected test area. Low-frequency acoustic waves detected at stations in Australia matched the pattern of atmospheric nuclear tests. What was being hidden, and why? South Africa, under international sanctions for its apartheid policies, had been developing nuclear weapons since the early 1970s. Israel, following a policy of nuclear ambiguity, neither confirmed nor denied its own program. A collaborative test would have triggered automatic sanctions against both nations. Allies the United States was reluctant to punish during Cold War strategic calculations. The geopolitical waters were murkier still. South Africa faced growing resistance from Soviet-backed forces in neighboring Angola. Israel had recently concluded the Camp David Accords. The Shah of Iran, a close ally to both countries, had just fallen. Some analysts suggested the test might have been intended as a warning to regional adversaries, visible enough to be detected, small enough to maintain plausible deniability. Declassified documents decades later revealed that U.S. intelligence agencies had concluded the flash was indeed a nuclear test. A 1,980 Defense Intelligence Agency report stated with 90% certainty that a nuclear explosion had occurred. Los Alamos National Laboratory scientists who designed the Vela satellites maintained the signal was authentic, yet officially, the incident remained classified as an anomalous event. Today, the southern Indian Ocean continues its slow heave beneath indifferent stars. No crater marks the seafloor, though at the suspected yield, between 2 and 3 kilotons, little trace would remain after 4 decades of currents. The official position of all potentially involved governments remains denial or silence. The truth may lie buried in still classified files, or perhaps in the memories of aging scientists and officials who carried their secrets into retirement. The Vela incident reminds us that history has hidden depths. Between the documented events of textbooks lie shadows, operations conducted beyond public knowledge, technologies deployed in secret, alliances formed beneath diplomatic tables. Like the deep ocean currents flowing past the Prince Edward Islands, these forces shape our world while remaining largely invisible, detectable only by the faintest signals registered on the most sensitive instruments. Silent signal the wow. Radio burst. On a warm August night in 1977, as Americans mourned Elvis Presley's recent death and lined up to see the first Star Wars film, something remarkable appeared on a strip of computer paper at Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope. Astronomer Jerry Eman, reviewing the printout days later, circled a sequence of characters and wrote "Wow" in the margin, giving a name to one of science's most enduring mysteries. The sequence, 6EQUJ5, represented signal intensities in a system where numbers 1 to 9 denote increasing strength, followed by letters AZ for stronger signals still. This progression, from 6 to E to Q to U to J and back to 5, traced a perfect bell curve over exactly 72 seconds, precisely how long it would take a fixed point in space to cross the Big Ear's observation beam as Earth rotated. The signal appeared at 1,420 MHz, a frequency astronomers call the waterhole, a quiet band near the emission frequency of hydrogen where intelligent civilizations might logically choose to broadcast. The characteristics seemed too perfect to be coincidence. The narrow bandwidth matched what SETI researchers expected from an artificial transmission rather than a natural phenomenon. Its strength, at 30 times the background noise, made it the strongest candidate for extraterrestrial communication ever recorded. The signal appeared to come from the constellation Sagittarius, near the star group Chi Sagittarii, about 220 light-years away. Yet, despite hundreds of subsequent observations of the same region, the signal never repeated. Big Ear listened again the next day, and many days after. Other radio telescopes, including the Very Large Array in New Mexico, aimed their more powerful receivers at the coordinates. Nothing was heard. The silence was as profound as the original signal had been compelling. Over the decades, astronomers have proposed various explanations that don't require alien broadcasters. Perhaps it was an unidentified Earth satellite, though none were known to be in the right position or capable of transmitting at that frequency. Military transmissions were considered, but the frequency was within a protected band where broadcasts were prohibited. Reflections of terrestrial signals off space debris seemed plausible, until analysis showed the signal's characteristics didn't match this explanation. In 2017, 40 years after the detection, astronomer Antonio Paris suggested hydrogen emissions from comets might explain the signal. Two comets, 266P, Christensen and P, 2008 Y2, had been in roughly the right region during the observation. But critics noted the signal's narrowband nature didn't match the broad spectral signature comets would produce. The mystery persisted. Others maintain the signal's characteristics still best match an artificial source. If it was a deliberate transmission from another civilization, perhaps it was a short beacon, a test broadcast, or even the electromagnetic side effect of an interstellar propulsion system, a ship rather than a message. Maybe the transmission continues but has shifted frequency, or is sent intermittently on a schedule we haven't deciphered. The Big Ear telescope itself has been dismantled, unable to continue the search. The site where it once collected whispers from deep space is now part of a golf course development. Computer printouts and digital copies are all that remain of its decades-long listening campaign. Newer, more sensitive arrays have taken up the watch, scanning millions of frequencies simultaneously, processing data volumes unimaginable in 1977. Yet the WOW signal remains unique, a perfect candidate with no satisfying explanation. It arrived during the same summer NASA launched the Voyager probes, carrying golden records of Earth sounds into interstellar space, humanity's own attempt to reach across the cosmic ocean. Two messages passed in the night perhaps, though only one was definitively received. Today, radio astronomers continue their patient vigil, headphones metaphorically pressed against the wall of night, listening for repetitions of that brief, tantalizing hello. The signal reminds us that 72 seconds can contain a mystery lasting decades. Static fills the receivers, stars wheel overhead, and somewhere above Ohio cornfields, a question mark hangs in the darkness. A single unexplained burst of energy that arrived once, said nothing we could understand, and vanished before we could reply. An 11-day gap, the disappearance of Agatha Christie. On a cold December evening in 1926, a Morris Cowley automobile was found abandoned near the edge of a chalk pit at Newlands Corner in Surrey, England. Inside were a fur coat, a small suitcase, and an expired driver's license belonging to Agatha Christie, already famous as the author of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd and other ingenious detective novels. The car's headlights were still on, illuminating nothing but winter fog and questions. Christie had left her home in Berkshire earlier that evening after kissing her sleeping daughter goodnight. She had written 2 letters, one to her secretary saying she was going to Yorkshire, another to her husband Archie, with whom she had argued earlier that day. Archie, a decorated World War I pilot, had recently asked for a divorce, having fallen in love with a younger woman named Nancy Neal. The letters Agatha left behind offered no hint of her destination or state of mind. The discovery of the empty car transformed a private marital crisis into national sensation. Britain mobilized a manhunt unprecedented for a private citizen. Over 1,000 police officers were assigned to the case. 1,500 volunteers combed the countryside with bloodhounds. Lakes and ponds near the abandoned car were dredged. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, brought one of Christie's gloves to a spirit medium, crime writer Dorothy L. Sayers visited the scene, looking for clues her fellow mystery novelist might have left behind. For 11 days, nothing. No body, no ransom demand, no communication. Newspapers speculated wildly: suicide, murder, publicity stunt for her next novel. Some suggested she had been killed by her husband, others that she had staged her own disappearance to frame him. The Daily News offered a £100 reward for information. American newspapers followed the story with equal fascination. Then, on December 14th, Christie was found alive at the Hydropathic Hotel in Harrogate, Yorkshire, where she had checked in under the name Mrs. Blank Braitace. Teresa Neal, using the surname of her husband's mistress. She had been recognized by a hotel musician who alerted police. When Archie arrived to identify her, witnesses reported she showed no particular pleasure at seeing him and seemed confused about her identity. The official explanation, offered by both Christie and her family, was amnesia. She claimed to remember nothing of the 11 days, suggesting she had suffered a fugue state triggered by grief over her mother's recent death and her husband's infidelity. Doctors diagnosed possible concussion from a car accident, though no evidence of such an accident was ever found. Alternative theories abounded then and persist now. Some medical experts suggested a genuine psychogenic fugue, a rare condition where trauma triggers temporary loss of personal identity, often accompanied by unexpected travel. Others proposed a calculated disappearance, either to punish her husband by causing him public embarrassment, to gain sympathy in the coming divorce, or to withdraw from an unbearable situation while under intense creative pressure. Christie herself never publicly discussed the incident again. In her autobiography, covering a life that extended another 50 years, she mentioned nothing of these 11 days. The experience appeared in none of her novels, though amnesia and disappeared persons would feature in later works like Sleeping Murder and Elephants Can Remember. Her biographers note that after the incident, her writing took on darker themes, particularly regarding betrayal. What happened in those 11 days? We know she placed advertisements in the Times newspaper under the name Teresa Neal. We know she danced in the hotel ballroom each evening and played the piano in public, hardly the behavior of someone attempting to hide. She seemed, by all accounts, to be enjoying herself, participating in social activities, and chatting with other guests who had no idea of her true identity or the nationwide search underway. Perhaps the most telling clue comes from Christie's own work. In her novels, she often explored the idea that the simplest explanation, properly understood, was usually correct. The evidence suggests a woman deeply wounded by betrayal who removed herself from an intolerable situation in a manner that caused maximum disruption to the husband who had hurt her. That she never spoke of it again suggests not amnesia but a private reckoning too personal to share, even with readers who followed her through hundreds of fictional mysteries. Today, Christie's disappearance remains the one mystery she left unsolved. Her house in Berkshire still stands, and visitors can see the desk where she wrote her final notes before driving into the December night. Her books continue to sell, her plays still run, and somewhere between the lines of her meticulously constructed puzzles might lie the clues to those missing 11 days, a blank space in the text, like the gap between chapters, waiting for a conclusion that never came. Cold whispers, the Greenbrier ghost testimony. In the frost-limbed winter of 1897, the courtrooms of Greenbrier County, West Virginia witnessed what remains perhaps the only legal proceeding in American history, where testimony from beyond the grave helps secure a murder conviction. The tale begins not with spectral apparitions floating through moonlit halls, but with something far more mundane, a young bride named Elva Zona Heaster, known simply as Zona to those who loved her. Zona had married Edward Shue, a drifting blacksmith with a charming smile that masked a violent temperament, after a brief courtship that raised eyebrows throughout the small community. Their marriage lasted just months before neighbors found Zona's body at the foot of the staircase in their modest home. Edward insisted on preparing his wife's body himself, wrapping her neck with a high-collared dress and scarf, weeping so inconsolably that the examining doctor barely glanced at the corpse before signing the death certificate. "Natural causes," he wrote. "Perhaps a fall, perhaps her heart simply stopped." But mothers know their daughters in ways that science cannot measure. Mary Jane Heaster, Zona's mother, had distrusted Edward from their first meeting. In the quiet darkness after Zona's burial, Mary Jane prayed, not for acceptance, but for truth. For 4 nights, she claimed, her daughter's spirit appeared at her bedside, slowly turning her spectral head to reveal a neck broken and twisted. "He did this to me," the apparition supposedly whispered before fading with the dawn light. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and Mary Jane's nocturnal visitations alone would never sway a prosecutor. But her conviction was so resolute, her details so specific, that authorities eventually agreed to exhume Zona's body. The subsequent autopsy revealed exactly what Mary Jane had described: a neck broken so severely that the windpipe had been crushed, finger-shaped bruises around the throat. What the living could not see, what Edward had concealed with high collars and theatrical grief, the dead had supposedly revealed. In the courtroom, Edward's past unraveled like a poorly knitted sweater. 2 previous wives, both dead under suspicious circumstances, a history of violent outbursts. While Mary Jane's ghostly testimony was indeed mentioned during the trial, it was the physical evidence that ultimately convicted Edward Shue. He was sentenced to life imprisonment at the West Virginia State Penitentiary, where he died in 1900. The Greenbrier ghost, as Zona became known, drifted from courtroom evidence into Appalachian folklore. Roads and historical markers now bear her name, her story whispered around campfires and recounted in hushed tones. We cannot know whether Mary Jane truly saw her daughter's spirit, or if grief and suspicion simply pointed her toward evidence others had missed. But in the hollows and valleys of West Virginia, many believe that justice sometimes requires voices from beyond our understanding. As winter winds rattle the clapboard shutters of those ancient Appalachian homes, some say they can still hear Zona's whisper carried on the draft, not a cry for vengeance, but a simple plea remembered by all who have been silenced. Listen to what remains unspoken, and look beyond what seems evident. Perhaps the most profound mysteries are not those that remain unsolved, but those that reveal how little we truly understand about the boundaries between this world and whatever may lie beyond. Pyramid in Siberia, the Labinkir Devil Lake. In the farthest reaches of Russia's Sakha Republic, where winter temperatures plummet to 60 below and summer brings but a fleeting respite from ice, lies Lake Labinkir, a body of water that should, by all scientific reasoning, freeze solid each winter. Yet portions of this remote Siberian lake remain mysteriously unfrozen even in deepest January, its dark waters breathing steam into the frigid air as though some great beast exhales beneath the surface. The indigenous Yakut people have long avoided these waters after sunset, passing down tales of a creature they call Labinkarsky Chert, the devil of Labinka. Their descriptions span generations: an enormous serpentine form with a bullish head, moving with impossible speed through waters that should be too cold to support large predatory life. In 1953, a Soviet geological expedition led by Viktor Tverdoklubov recorded seeing a dark grey oval shape about 20 meters long moving along the lake surface. The scientists, trained to document rather than embellish, noted the sighting in their official report, a fact that distinguishes Labinka's mystery from mere campfire stories. Sonar surveys conducted in the 1960s detected anomalous moving objects estimated at over 10 meters in length, while divers in 2006 discovered the remains of a wooden boat that appeared to have been crushed from below rather than damaged by rocks or ice. Most compelling, perhaps, was the 2012 expedition that registered on sonar what appeared to be a solid object approximately 25 feet long moving through the lake's depths at considerable speed. Skeptics offer more mundane explanations. Sturgeon, though not native to the lake, could theoretically have been introduced and grown to exceptional size in isolation. Gas eruptions from geothermal vents might explain both surface disturbances and the lake's resistance to complete freezing. The crushing pressure of shifting ice could account for damaged boats, while ordinary fish viewed through the prismatic distortion of icy water might seem monstrous to frightened observers. Yet something about Labinkir defies simple explanation. The lake sits atop a geological fault line, its depths reaching nearly 300 feet, unusual for the region. Scientific analysis has found the water contains unexplained anomalies in mineral content compared to neighboring lakes. Indigenous accounts of the creature predate any possible scientific hoax by centuries. As snow falls silently over Labinka's dark waters, the question remains: what breathes beneath that ancient surface? Is it merely the release of primordial gases from the Earth's crust, the movement of conventional aquatic life misinterpreted, or something else entirely? In places where humanity's footprint remains light, where isolation breeds both preservation and mystery, perhaps the boundaries between natural phenomena and legendary beasts grow as thin as ice in spring. Phantom footprints, the Devil's Walks of Devon. On the morning of the 9th of February, 1855, residents of South Devon, England emerged from their homes after a light overnight snowfall to discover something impossible. A single line of footprints, each the shape of a small cloven hoof, stretched across their county for over 160 kilometers. The tracks appeared to follow no rational path, traversing fields and gardens, crossing rivers as though the snow-covered water offered solid footing, climbing walls, and continuing uninterrupted across rooftops where no human could have reached. The pattern of each print was consistent, roughly 4 inches long and 3 inches wide, with the appearance of a cleft hoof, rather than any known animal paw or human boot. More disturbing still was their methodical spacing, each impression precisely 8.5 inches from the next, forming a perfectly straight line, as though whatever made them had proceeded with mechanical precision on 2 legs rather than 4. No deviation, no pause for rest, no sign of hesitation. Local newspapers recorded the community's terror as the mysterious tracks were discovered across multiple towns nearly simultaneously: Topsham, Dawlish, Teignmouth, Totnes, spanning distances no single creature could have covered in a single night. The Times of London reported how neither wall nor hedge appeared to impede the mysterious visitor, while rural communities whispered of supernatural explanations. Some claimed it was the devil himself walking through Devon, pointing to biblical descriptions of Satan's cloven hooves. Clergymen were summoned to frightened households, and some families refused to leave their homes. Scientific minds proposed alternative theories. Sir Richard Owen, the prominent naturalist who had coined the term dinosaur, suggested the tracks were made by badgers or raccoons leaping through snow. Others proposed that escaped kangaroos from private menageries might explain the bipedal pattern, while some pointed to wood mice hopping in unusual patterns. An elaborate hoax involving balloons dragging hoof-shaped implements was theorized but never substantiated. Perhaps most compelling was the meteorological explanation, that partial snowmelt and refreezing had distorted ordinary animal tracks into something seemingly supernatural, while mass hysteria and newspaper reports encouraged people to connect unrelated prints across vast distances. What remains difficult to explain, however, is the continuity reported by multiple independent observers, the consistent appearance of the tracks across such varied terrain, and their presence in locations physically inaccessible to conventional creatures. No conclusive evidence has ever settled the mystery of the devil's footprints. As moonlight now casts its pale glow across the frost-covered hedgerows of Devon, the question lingers like winter mist. What walked there that February night? Was it merely the conjunction of natural phenomena misinterpreted through the lens of superstition, an elaborate prank that escaped detection, or something that defies conventional categorization? The tracks themselves have long since melted away, leaving only the footprints of legend impressed upon our collective imagination. A city submerged, the Atlantis legend. Beneath fathoms of azure Mediterranean waters, or perhaps hidden under Antarctic ice, entombed within the sandy floors of the Atlantic Ocean, or tucked away in some pocket of the Iberian coast, somewhere, many believe, lie the crumbled marble colonnades and shattered amphitheaters of humanity's most enduring lost civilization, Atlantis. The tale begins not with archaeological evidence, but with the philosophical dialogues of Plato, around 360 BCE. In his works Timaeus and Critias, the Greek philosopher describes an advanced island nation that existed 9,000 years before his time, a civilization of unprecedented achievement located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Our modern Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, Atlantis was a naval power of unparalleled might, controlling vast territories until it was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune following a failed attempt to conquer Athens. What distinguishes Atlantis from mere myth is Plato's unusually specific details. The city's concentric layout with alternating rings of land and water, its dimensions measured in precise stadia, its abundance of the mysterious metal orichalcum, and the elaborate description of its governmental structure. These elements have led generations of scholars to debate whether Plato was recounting an actual historical event transmitted through oral tradition, creating an allegorical warning about hubris, or synthesizing accounts of various real catastrophes into a singular cautionary tale. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw numerous Mediterranean civilizations fall simultaneously, possibly providing a historical template. The volcanic eruption that devastated Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE, offers compelling parallels. A prosperous island civilization destroyed suddenly by natural forces, creating tsunamis that might explain flood narratives throughout the region. Others point to the ancient city of Tartessos in Spain, described in historical records but never conclusively located, or to the Minoan civilization of Crete, whose advanced culture and naval prowess match aspects of Plato's account. More exotic theories place Atlantis in locations ranging from Indonesia to Ireland, Bolivia to the Bahamas. Some even suggest Antarctica, proposing that the continent was ice-free and inhabited before shifting tectonic plates moved it to its current polar position. Each theory addresses certain aspects of Plato's description while struggling with others. What makes Atlantis so persistent in our collective imagination is not just the romance of a lost golden age, but how it mirrors flood myths found across disparate cultures worldwide, from Mesopotamian accounts of Utnapishtim to Hindu descriptions of Manu's survival, from Chinese tales of Gunyu to Mesoamerican legends of previous worlds destroyed by water. Perhaps Atlantis endures because it speaks to something fundamental in human experience, our awareness of civilization's fragility against nature's might. Expeditions continue to this day, employing satellite imagery, deep-sea submersibles, and ground-penetrating radar to search for evidence. Yet perhaps the most profound aspect of Atlantis is not whether we eventually locate its physical remains, but how it has functioned as both warning and aspiration throughout human history, a reminder of what we might achieve and how quickly it might be lost. As imagined waves continue their eternal motion above where Atlantis may or may not rest, we are left to contemplate which of our own achievements might one day become someone else's legend, our concrete and steel eventually joining those marble colonnades crumbling under fathoms of quiet sea. Unspoken code, the Baltic Sea anomaly. In the lightless depths of the Baltic Sea, approximately 90 meters beneath churning surface waters, lies a geological formation that has spawned a decade of speculation, scientific investigation, and conspiracy theories. First identified in June 2011 by the Swedish diving team Ocean X, sonar imaging revealed a curiously symmetrical, disc-shaped object approximately 60 feet in diameter resting on the seabed between Sweden and Finland. The initial sonar scan suggested an almost manufactured appearance, a rounded shape with straight edges, apparent right angles, and what looked like an entrance or pathway leading to the formation. More intriguing still, the divers reported equipment malfunctions when approaching the anomaly, with electrical devices including satellite phones and underwater cameras failing within 200 meters of the object. Magnetometer readings showed unusual patterns consistent with metallic content, despite the object's stone-like appearance. When Ocean X returned with documentary filmmakers and better equipment, they captured footage showing what appeared to be rock-like material with formations resembling staircases, spherical shapes, and hole-like structures. Samples retrieved from the site were analyzed by geologist Steve Weiner, who identified minerals including limonite and goethite, natural substances, but ones that raised further questions when discovered in such unusual configurations. The internet, predictably, erupted with theories ranging from sunken alien spacecraft to forgotten Nazi technology, from ancient Atlantean outposts to elaborate natural formation. Ufologists pointed to the disc-like shape and electronic interference as classic signs of extraterrestrial origin, while some fringe historians suggested connections to lost Baltic civilizations predating known archaeological records. Mainstream geologists offer more terrestrial explanations. Glacial movement during the last ice age could have deposited and shaped rocks into unusual formations. Methane gas eruptions from the seabed might explain both the circular structure and the electronic interference through localized magnetic field disruptions. Some scientists suggest it may be a natural geological formation similar to underwater basalt columns found elsewhere, merely viewed from an angle that emphasizes symmetry where randomness actually exists. Yet the Baltic anomaly resists definitive categorization. Unlike many mysterious formations, it exists in a relatively accessible location, in well-mapped waters frequently traversed by shipping vessels. That it remained undiscovered until 2011 suggests either remarkable oversight or the possibility that geological processes continue to reshape the Baltic seabed in ways we don't fully comprehend. What lies beneath those cold northern waters? Extraterrestrial artifact, forgotten human construction, or simply nature's capacity to create patterns that mimic design? As divers drift amid the briny darkness where ancient granite catches occasional glimpses of their lights, the Baltic anomaly maintains its silence, neither confirming nor denying the theories that swirl above it like the currents that have shaped it for millennia. Perhaps the true anomaly is not the formation itself, but our persistent human need to find meaning and intention in the random processes of an indifferent universe. Or alternatively, our occasional failure to recognize genuine mysteries when they present themselves from the darkness of the deep. Cock without maker, the stratospheric hum. In the quiet hours when the world sleeps, when streetlights cast their amber glow and the distant hum of highways fades to silence, some people hear it. A persistent, low-frequency drone that seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. A sound like the idle of a distant diesel engine, or the sustained note of a cosmic organ pipe. The kind of sound that, once noticed, becomes impossible to ignore. Since the 1970s, reports of this mysterious auditory phenomenon have emerged from virtually every corner of the globe. The hum, as it's come to be known, defies easy explanation. It isn't thunderstorms. It isn't tectonic activity. It isn't the collective electrical hum of human civilization. At least, that's what those who hear it will tell you. The first documented cases appeared in Bristol, England in 1979. Residents described a relentless, pulsing drone that became most noticeable in the dead of night. Medical professionals initially dismissed it as mass hysteria or tinnitus. Local authorities blamed industrial equipment. Yet the reports persisted, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching shores far beyond the industrial heart of Bristol. By the early 1990s, the phenomenon had crossed the Atlantic. In Taos, New Mexico, a small desert town known for its artist community and striking adobe architecture, nearly 2% of residents reported hearing the same mysterious drone. The Taos hum, as it was christened by local media, attracted the attention of researchers from Los Alamos National Laboratory and the University of New Mexico. Despite deploying sophisticated acoustic equipment throughout the region, they recorded nothing unusual. The hum, it seemed, was either incredibly elusive or existed only in the minds of those who perceived it. And yet, the hotspots multiplied. Auckland, New Zealand, became another nexus of reports. Then Windsor, Ontario, then Bondi, Australia. In each location, between 2 and 11% of the population claimed to hear a seemingly random subset united only by their shared auditory experience. Elderly women proved particularly sensitive to the phenomenon, though reports spanned all demographics. The skeptical explanation is straightforward enough. Tinnitus, that phantom ringing caused by damage to the inner ear, coupled with the power of suggestion. When we hear about a mysterious sound, our brains become primed to detect it, to find patterns in the ambient noise that surrounds us. The suggestion plants a seed that grows into certainty, but the Hum's believers insist this explanation falls short. Tinnitus typically manifests as a high-pitched ringing, not a low-frequency drone. And while tinnitus sufferers hear their phantom sounds regardless of location, hum hearers often report the phenomenon disappears when they travel beyond certain geographic boundaries. Whatever causes the hum, they argue, must be external, not internal. Scientific investigations have yielded a spectrum of possible explanations. Industrial equipment operating at frequencies just above or below human hearing thresholds. The resonant frequency of buildings interacting with environmental factors, microseismic activity, the constant, subtle vibrations of the Earth itself, amplified through geological formations. Even the endless churning of ocean waves, generating infrasound that travels thousands of miles before manifesting as a barely perceptible drone. More exotic theories point skyward. VLF radio transmissions used for submarine communications penetrate deep into the Earth and sea, creating electromagnetic fields that span continents. These fields, some researchers suggest, might induce vibrations in certain objects or potentially even in the bones of the inner ear, creating an auditory experience that defies conventional detection methods. Space weather provides another celestial suspect. The solar wind, that stream of charged particles constantly flowing from our sun, interacts with Earth's magnetosphere, creating geomagnetic pulsations. These invisible waves wash over our planet constantly, their frequencies sometimes dropping into ranges that might, theoretically, be perceptible to human senses. Then there are the conspiracy theories. HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program in Alaska, stands accused of everything from weather manipulation to mind control. Its powerful radio transmitters, designed to study the ionosphere, allegedly create the resonant frequencies that manifest as the hum. Similar accusations target secret military installations, experimental aircraft, and classified communications networks. What makes the hum so persistently mysterious is its subjective nature. Unlike cryptids glimpsed in forests or UFOs tracked on radar, the hum exists primarily as an internal experience reported by witnesses. We cannot photograph it, cannot capture it in a specimen jar, cannot point instruments at it with any certainty. And yet, for those who hear it, the experience is undeniably real. They describe sleepless nights, growing anxiety, and the peculiar isolation that comes from perceiving something others cannot. Some have gone to extraordinary lengths to escape its selling homes, moving across countries, sleeping in underground bunkers, lined with acoustic insulation. A few have even taken their own lives, driven to desperation by the inescapable drone. Perhaps most telling is the consistency of descriptions across decades and continents. From Bristol to Taos to Auckland, witnesses describe not just similar sounds but similar emotional response, a feeling of inexplicable unease, as though the hum carries some subliminal message just beyond comprehension. As our technological capabilities have expanded, so too have our attempts to capture the elusive phenomenon. Sophisticated acoustic monitoring networks now span former hum hotspots. Citizen scientists deploy smartphone apps designed to detect infrasound. Neurologists study the brains of hum hearers, searching for commonalities that might explain their shared perception. Yet the hum remains elusive, like a faint signal vanishing whenever we turn our full attention toward it. It reminds us that despite our networks of sensors and satellites, despite our models and measurements, the world still harbors phenomena that defy our instruments and understanding. Listen closely on a quiet night. Feel the subtle pressure against your eardrums. That omnipresent background noise might be nothing more than the blood pulsing through your veins, the electrical activity of your nervous system, the ambient soundtrack of modern life. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it's something more, a vast and subtle mechanism operating just beyond our comprehension, a cosmic clock without a maker, ticking away in the humming night air, pulsing like a distant drum that only some can hear. Vanished library, the Nineveh Gaps. In the 7th century BCE, in a palace complex sprawling across the eastern bank of the Tigris River, a king named Ashurbanipal assembled the world's first systematically organized library. This was Nineveh, capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a city of perhaps 0 souls where the king had gathered scholars, scribes, and diviners from across the known world. Ashurbanipal was no ordinary monarch. Unlike many rulers of his time, he could read and write. having trained in the complex cuneiform script that had evolved over millennia in Mesopotamia. He took particular pride in his scholarly accomplishments, boasting in one inscription, "I have read intricate tablets inscribed with obscure Sumerian and Akkadian that are difficult to interpret. I have examined stone inscriptions from before the flood." His library reflected this intellectual ambition. Royal agents scoured temple collections and private archives throughout Mesopotamia, bringing tablets back to Nineveh for copying or outright acquisition. Scribes worked constantly, pressing reed styluses into soft clay to replicate texts on astronomy, medicine, history, mythology, divination, mathematics, and ritual. The resulting collection, perhaps 30 tablets in total, represented the culmination of 3 millennia of Mesopotamian intellectual tradition. The tablets themselves were masterpieces of information technology. Typically palm-sized rectangles of clay, they were inscribed while wet, then dried in the sun or fired in kilns for permanence. Each bore a colophona, kind of ancient metadata, tag identifying its contents, its place in larger text series, its scribe, and sometimes even its source. Larger works spanned multiple tablets, carefully numbered to maintain their sequence. The most precious were stored in labeled ceramic jars or wooden shelves in dedicated rooms. What makes this ancient wonder even more remarkable was its organization. Ashurbanipal's scribes developed classification systems, cataloging protocols, and even library call numbers that allowed specific works to be located within the vast collection. They compiled thematic catalogs listing hundreds of tablet series by title, essentially library, finding aids that served as ancient card catalogs. And then, in 612 BCE, it all ended in fire and rubble. Nineveh fell to a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians who sacked the city with particular vengeance, toppling the hated Assyrian Empire that had dominated the region for centuries. The palace complex burned. Wooden shelves collapsed, clay tablets shattered, and the greatest library of the ancient world was buried beneath the debris of a fallen civilization. For over 500 years, the library lay forgotten beneath the mounds that once were Nineveh. Then, in the 1850s, British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard and his assistant Hormuzd Rassam began excavations at the site, uncovering room after room filled with thousands of broken clay tablets. The greatest archaeological discovery of the age was shipped back to the British Museum in hundreds of wooden crates, launching the modern field of Assyriology. Yet as scholars began the painstaking work of sorting, cataloguing, and translating these fragments, a troubling pattern emerged. The library catalogues they recovered listed hundreds of texts that seemed to be missing: works on glassmaking, treatises on metallurgy, historical chronicles, technical manuals. Approximately 60% of the known tablet series mentioned in the catalogues have never been found. This is the Nineveh gap, the tantalizing void where missing knowledge should be. What secrets of the ancient world might lie in those absent tablets? What technological processes, historical accounts, or philosophical insights have we lost? Some scholars propose a prosaic explanation. Perhaps these missing texts were written on materials more perishable than clay. Wax-covered wooden writing boards, papyrus scrolls, and parchment documents would have burned completely in the conflagration that destroyed the palace. The catalogues repeatedly mention these alternative writing media, suggesting that the library's true scope extended far beyond its clay tablet collection. Yet a more intriguing possibility has captivated both scholars and the public imagination. Ancient texts hint at a second chamber, a hidden repository where the most precious documents were secured. If such a vault existed, it might have escaped both the ancient destruction and modern discovery. This tantalizing possibility has fueled continuing archaeological interest in Nineveh, despite the considerable challenges. The site spans several square kilometers, with the ancient city buried beneath modern Mosul in northern Iraq. Political instability and warfare have made systematic excavation difficult. During the Iraq War and subsequent ISIS occupation, the archaeological site suffered significant damage from looting and deliberate destruction. Satellite imagery reveals craters from military activity and the tracks of bulldozers used by looters. Nevertheless, archaeological work continues. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted during brief windows of access have identified several promising anomaly spaces beneath the ancient palace complex that might represent undiscovered chambers. Digital reconstruction efforts have virtually reassembled thousands of tablet fragments, revealing texts thought lost. And the painstaking translation of the library's recovered portions continues to yield new insights into what the missing sections might contain. Perhaps most promising are references in recovered texts to specific locations within the palace where certain tablet collections were stored. By mapping these against archaeological floor plans, researchers hope to identify areas that may have escaped both ancient looting and modern excavation. The stakes extend beyond mere historical curiosity. The Nineveh Library contains the earliest known versions of texts that would shape human civilization for millennia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, with its flood narrative that would later echo in biblical accounts, astronomical observations that influenced Greek and later Islamic science, medical texts describing surgical procedures not rediscovered until millennia later. What else might the missing 60% contain? Advanced mathematical concepts, lost technologies, historical accounts that would rewrite our understanding of the ancient world. The gaps in the library catalogue tantalize with possibilities. Modern digital technologies offer new hope for recovering at least some of this lost knowledge. Multispectral imaging reveals text invisible to the naked eye on damaged tablets. 3D scanning captures the subtle impressions of cuneiform characters on eroded surfaces. Machine learning algorithms identify connections between fragments, virtually reassembling shattered tablets. Yet for all our technological sophistication, we remain haunted by what we cannot recover. Each broken tablet edge represents a boundary between knowledge and ignorance, between recovered wisdom and permanent loss. The dust settles on cuneiform shards that may never be read, their messages silenced by the passage of 600 years. Perhaps somewhere beneath the ruins of Nineveh, protected by the very destruction that consumed the city, a sealed chamber still waits. Perhaps within it lie intact tablets, bearing the lost knowledge of an ancient civilization, patient clay messengers, waiting to speak again after millennia of silence. A trail of light, the Phoenix Lights. On the evening of March 13, 1997, the night sky above Arizona came alive with something extraordinary. Beginning around 8:15 p.m., thousands of residents across a 300-mile corridor from the Nevada border through Phoenix to Tucson reported seeing a massive, V-shaped formation of lights moving slowly and silently across the desert sky. The witnesses weren't isolated individuals. They were law enforcement officers, pilots, military personnel, and everyday citizens, people accustomed to identifying conventional aircraft, weather phenomena, and the familiar celestial objects that grace Arizona's famously clear night skies. What they described defied conventional explanation. A rigid, coherent formation of 5 to 7 lights, arranged in a distinct V pattern, spanning a distance estimated between 1 and 2 miles wide. It was otherworldly, recalled Tim Lay, who along with his family watched the formation pass directly overhead from their Phoenix home. The craft was so enormous that it took more than 5 minutes to pass over us, moving maybe 25 miles per hour. We could see the stars go out as it passed in front of them, one by one. There was no sound, nothing. Just this massive presence gliding through the sky. The formation maintained perfect alignment as it traveled, suggesting a single massive structure rather than separate objects flying in formation. Witnesses consistently described a solid, dark mass connecting the lights visible as a silhouette against the night sky, blocking out stars as it passed. Several observers, including trained pilots, estimated its altitude at between 10 and 20 feet, well below normal commercial air traffic patterns. By 10:00 p.m. that same evening, a second wave of sightings began. This time, a string of stationary orange-red orbs appeared over the Phoenix area, hovering for several minutes before blinking out one by one. Unlike the earlier V formation, these lights appeared to pulse and flare, changing in brightness and occasionally dropping what witnesses described as smaller lights that would fall toward the horizon before disappearing. The scale of the event was unprecedented. The National UFO Reporting Center received over 700 calls in the days following. Local police stations were inundated with reports. Local news stations broadcast witness interviews and amateur video footage showing distant lights moving across the night sky. The official explanation, when it finally came, struck many witnesses as absurdly inadequate. The U.S. Air Force attributed the second wave of sightings to illumination flares dropped by A-10 Warthog aircraft during training exercises at the Barry Goldwater Range southwest of Phoenix. According to military statements, pilots from the Maryland Air National Guard had been conducting routine nighttime exercises, dropping flares that can illuminate the landscape for ground troops. This explanation addressed only the later stationary lights, not the earlier, more dramatic V-shaped formation. For this, authorities offered various conventional possibilities: a formation of aircraft, weather balloons, experimental military craft, or simply mass misperception of normal air traffic. Skeptical investigators have attempted to reconstruct the events through triangulation of witness reports, radar data, and flight records. They suggest the V formation may have been a group of planes flying in formation, perhaps a squadron of A-10s returning to base after exercises. The apparent solid structure connecting the lights, they argue, was an optical illusion created by the human tendency to connect the dots when viewing distant light sources. Yet this explanation strains against the remarkable consistency of witness descriptions. Hundreds of people, observing from different locations and perspectives, reported seeing not just lights but a distinct craft, massive, silent, and moving at improbably slow speeds for conventional aircraft. Many witnesses had clear views as the object passed directly overhead, allowing them to discern its structure against the background of stars. Radar evidence from that night presents its own puzzles. FAA recordings from air traffic control facilities in Albuquerque and Phoenix show no unusual returns corresponding to the reported object. However, several witnesses, including a retired airline pilot, claim to have contacted air traffic controllers during the event and been told that an unknown return was indeed visible on radar screens. The event's significance extends beyond the immediate question of what people saw that night. The Phoenix Lights became a cultural touchstone, a mass sighting event that forced serious public discussion of an often ridiculed subject. Arizona Governor Fife Symington, who initially mocked the sightings at a press conference, later admitted he had witnessed the formation himself. "It was dramatic," he stated in 2007, "and it couldn't have been flares because it was too symmetrical. It had a geometric outline, a constant motion, and an overall solid formation." The sociology of mass sightings presents its own mysteries. How do thousands of people across a wide geographic area come to report such similar observations? Skeptics point to the power of suggestion, the human tendency toward pattern recognition, and the media amplification that can turn isolated misperceptions into seemingly coordinated reports. Yet the Phoenix Lights began before the media reported them, with initial witnesses having no knowledge that others were simultaneously observing the same phenomenon. The consistency of reports, the V-shape, the slow movement, the absolute silence, the enormous size emerged organically from independent accounts, not from media templates that witnesses might have unconsciously adopted. From an astrophysical perspective, the odds seem stacked against extraterrestrial visitation. The vast distances between stars, the energy requirements for interstellar travel, and the absence of unambiguous evidence for technological civilizations beyond Earth all suggest extreme improbability. Yet improbability is not impossibility, and the universe has repeatedly surprised us with phenomena once thought impossible. More prosaic explanations have their own challenges. If the formation was military aircraft, why would they fly in tight formation at low altitude over a major population center? If it was an experimental craft, why display it so publicly? If it was flares, how could they maintain perfect formation while drifting with the wind? 28 years later, the Phoenix Lights remain unexplained. FOIA requests have yielded heavily redacted documents. Radar data from military installations has never been released. The promised official investigation never materialized beyond cursory statements about training exercises. For those who witnessed it, the experience remains visceral and immediate. You don't forget something like that. says former Phoenix councilwoman Frances Barwood, who launched an official inquiry into the event. It changes how you see everything: the night sky, the government, the possibilities of what might be out there. As the desert sun sets each evening over Arizona, painting the horizon in deepening shades of amber and purple, some witnesses still look up, half expecting to see that perfect V formation return. The night sky holds its secrets close, but occasionally, perhaps once in a generation, it offers a glimpse of something that challenges our understanding of what moves through the darkness above our world. Cryptic echoes the bloop sound. On the afternoon of July 7, 1997, underwater hydrophones positioned throughout the Pacific Ocean detected something extraordinary. A massive acoustic event erupted from the depths, so powerful that it was recorded by sensors more than 50 kilometers apart. The sound rose rapidly in frequency, over about a minute before falling away into the background noise of the ocean. When scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, analyzed the recording and played it back at 16 times normal speed to bring it into human hearing range, they heard a distinctive sounder, wet, bubbling bloop that would launch decades of speculation and scientific investigation. The bloop, as it came to be known, was no ordinary ocean noise. Its volume and frequency pattern defied easy classification. It was several times louder than the blue whale, previously considered the loudest animal on Earth, and exhibited characteristics unlike any known natural phenomenon. More puzzling still was its apparent origin. Triangulated to a remote region of the South Pacific, approximately 500 kilometers west of Chile's southern coast. This wasn't just any random patch of ocean. By coincidence or cosmic joke, the bloop emerged from the vicinity of what sailors call Point Nemo, the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, the point in the global ocean furthest from any land. Named for Captain Nemo of Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, this remote location sits over 500 kilometers from the nearest shore in any direction. It is, quite literally, the middle of nowhere. And as literary coincidences go, Point Nemo has another claim to fame. H.P. Lovecraft, master of cosmic horror, placed the sunken city of R'lyeh prison of the monstrous alien entity Cthulhian, approximately the same remote Pacific region. When the bloop's location was announced, Lovecraft enthusiasts couldn't help but note the eerie parallel between fiction and reality. Had something ancient stirred in the abyssal depths? Scientific speculation initially focused on biological sources. The bloop's acoustic signature resembled biological sounds in its frequency, modulation, and duration, albeit at unprecedented scale. Could it represent an unknown marine species? The ocean's depths remain largely unexplored, with new species discovered regularly. Marine biologists estimate that perhaps 90% of deep ocean species remain undocumented. The giant squid offered one tantalizing possibility. These legendary creatures, once dismissed as sailors' fantasies, are now known to reach lengths of up to 13 meters. They inhabit precisely the deep ocean environments near where the bloop was detected, yet no known squid possesses sound-producing organs capable of generating such powerful acoustic energy. If the bloop came from a biological source, it would require either an unknown mechanism in a known species or an entirely new creature of truly massive proportions. Other researchers propose geological explanations. Undersea volcanoes, hydrothermal vents, and seafloor methane deposits all generate acoustic signals. The mid-ocean ridgeous underwater mountain ranges, where tectonic plates separate, experience constant seismic activity as new crust forms. Perhaps the bloop represented some unusual interaction between magma and seawater, or the collapse of a submarine canyon. Yet the bloop didn't match the acoustic signatures of these known geological phenomena. Submarine volcanic eruptions typically produce continuous, rumbling sounds rather than the discrete, modulated signal of the bloop. Seafloor gas releases tend to generate bubbling sounds of consistent frequency. The bloop's distinctive rise and fall pattern remained anomalous. For nearly 15 years, the mystery persisted, becoming a staple of documentary specials and internet forums. NOAA scientists continued to analyze the recording, comparing it against their growing library of marine acoustic phenomena. Amateur researchers speculated about everything from secret submarine communications to underwater alien bases. The bloop entered popular culture, referenced in video games, novels, and films as shorthand for oceanic mystery. Then, in 2012, NOAA announced a conclusion. The bloop was most likely an ice quake, the sound of ice fracturing in Antarctica. As massive ice shelves break apart, they can generate extraordinarily powerful low-frequency sounds that propagate efficiently through ocean water. The timing of the bloop corresponded with the Antarctic winter, when thermal stresses in ice sheets reach their maximum. This explanation satisfied many scientific criteria. The volume made sense. Calving icebergs generate sounds that can be detected thousands of kilometers away. The frequency pattern could be explained by the progressive fracturing of ice under stress. And the location, while not in Antarctica, lay along acoustic waveguides that could channel sound from the southern continent. Yet doubts persist among some researchers. The bloop's acoustic signature differs from other documented icequakes in its rapid frequency modulation. Its single occurrence neither, repeated despite continued monitoring, seems unusual for a presumably common glacial process, and its extreme volume remains difficult to reconcile with even large-scale ice-carving events. What makes the bloop particularly fascinating is how it highlights the limitations of our knowledge about Earth's oceans. We have better maps of Mars than of our own seafloor. The average depth of the world's oceans is about 3,700 meters, with the deepest points reaching nearly 11, 0 meters depths that experience pressures exceeding 0 atmospheres and remain largely inaccessible to direct human exploration. In these lightless realms, sound becomes the primary means of sensing and communicating. Sound travels nearly 5 times faster through water than through air, and low-frequency sounds can propagate for thousands of kilometers with minimal attenuation. The ocean is an acoustic environment, filled with clicks, moans, rumbles, and whistles from sources both known and unknown. NOAA's hydrophone arrays, originally installed to detect Soviet submarines during the Cold War, now serve as scientific instruments, constantly monitoring this underwater soundscape. They've captured an acoustic bestiary of mysterious sounds: the upsweep, the slowdown, the whistle, Julia, each with its own distinctive signature, and each representing phenomena we don't fully understand. The bloop stands out among these acoustic anomalies for its sheer power and its singular occurrence. Unlike other unidentified sounds that repeat with seasonal patterns, the bloop erupted once and never again, as though whatever generated it had surfaced briefly before returning to the lightless depths. Perhaps the icequake explanation is correct. Perhaps a particularly massive ice shelf collapsed in just the right way to generate this unusual acoustic signature. Perhaps the acoustic waveguides of the deep ocean channeled this sound to hydrophones thousands of kilometers away, creating the illusion of a point source near the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. Or perhaps something else entirely caused the bloop, something neither biological nor geological, but belonging to some category we haven't yet conceived. The ocean depths hold secrets we are only beginning to understand, realms where pressure, darkness, and cold create conditions unlike anything in human experience. As our technology advances, as autonomous underwater vehicles probe deeper and stay longer, as machine learning algorithms sift through thousands of hours of hydrophone recordings, we may yet identify the true source of the bloop. Until then, it remains one of the ocean's cryptic echoes, a sound from the abyss that reminds us how little we know about the vast waters that cover over 70% of our planet's surface. Listen to the recording if you can find it online, that accelerated, almost organic bubbling that emerges from the background noise of the ocean. It lasts just a few seconds in its time-compressed form, yet it represents one of the most powerful acoustic events ever recorded in Earth's oceans. Then imagine it at its true infrasonic frequency, a deep, minute-long call that propagated through thousands of kilometers of dark water, passing beneath ships and over seamounts, traversing the abyssal plains where sunlight never reaches, before finally drifting into silence, leaving behind only its cryptic echo in our hydrophone recordings. A doorway on Mars, the Curiosity shadow. On May 7, 2022, NASA's Curiosity rover captured an image that would quickly captivate the internet and spark a global conversation about perception, possibility, and our deepest hopes about what might exist beyond Earth. The photograph, taken by the rover's Marscam instrument as it explored Mars's Gale crater, showed what appeared to be a perfectly rectangular doorway carved into a rock fascia, seemingly artificial entrance leading into darkness. The image spread rapidly across social media, forums, and news sites. NASA finds doorway on Mars, proclaimed headlines. Ancient Martian civilization discovered, suggested others. Within hours, the photograph had been viewed millions of times, analyzed pixel by amateur investigators, and incorporated into both serious scientific discussions and elaborate conspiracy theories. At first glance, the formation is undeniably striking. A dark, rectangular void cuts into the reddish-brown Martian sedimentary rock with edges so straight they appear machined. The doorway's proportions seem oddly familiar, roughly the size and shape of a residential entrance on Earth, complete with a lintel stone above and flat threshold below. Shadow and light play across the opening, suggesting depth of passage leading somewhere beyond our view. NASA scientists responded quickly to the growing public interest, explaining that what appeared to be a doorway was actually a natural crevice, approximately 30 centimeters high, about the size of a small dog door, rather than a human entrance. The rectangular shape resulted from normal geological processes, sedimentary layers fracturing along natural stress lines, combined with Mars's lower gravity, allowing larger fragments to separate without immediately collapsing. In geology, we call these features open fractures, explained Ashwin Vasavada, Curiosity's project scientist. They're common on both Earth and Mars, particularly in sedimentary formations where rock layers naturally break along flat plains. What makes this one appear door-like is simply the angle of the sunlight and the perspective of the rover's camera. The explanation was sound, scientific, and utterly unsatisfying to those who had glimpsed, however briefly, the possibility of something extraordinary. The doorway touched something deeper than mere curiosity about Martian geology. It activated an ancient human instinct, the drive to seek meaning in patterns, to find order amid chaos, to discover signs of others like ourselves in the wilderness of existence. This psychological phenomenon pareidolia describes our tendency to perceive familiar patterns, particularly faces and human-made objects, in random or ambiguous stimuli. It's why we see faces in cloud formations, Jesus on toast, or a rabbit in the moon. Our brains evolved to quickly identify patterns that might indicate presence of predators, prey, or other humans. False positives, seeing a face where none exists, were less costly evolutionarily than false negatives, failing to notice an actual predator. So our perceptual systems developed a bias toward recognizing patterns, even when they're not objectively present. Mars has been a particular hotbed for pareidotic interpretations since we began capturing images of its surface. The face on Mars, photographed by the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976, became an enduring cultural touchstone despite subsequent high-resolution imaging revealing it to be an unremarkable mesa. The Mars rat, Mars lizard, floating spoon, and countless other perceived objects have appeared in rover images over the decades, each briefly capturing public imagination before being explained as rocks, shadows, and dust. What makes the Curiosity doorway particularly compelling is its geometric precision. Unlike the face on Mars, which required considerable imagination to perceive as human-like, the doorway presents almost perfect right angles and flat surfaces, features we instinctively associate with intelligent construction rather than natural processes. Yet geology is perfectly capable of producing such geometry. On Earth, columnar basalt formations like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland or Devil's Tower in Wyoming demonstrate nature's ability to create seemingly architectural structures. Sedimentary rocks routinely fracture along rectangular patterns due to mineral composition and stress distribution. Wind and water erosion can carve openings that mimic deliberate design. Mars's geological processes operate similarly to Earth's, albeit modified by different gravity, atmospheric conditions, and lack of flowing surface water for the past several billion years. The sedimentary rocks in Gale crater, where Curiosity captured the image, formed when the crater contained an ancient lake. As these water-deposited layers dried, compacted, and eventually fractured, they naturally broke along planes of weakness, creating the geometric patterns we observe. Scale is another crucial factor easily distorted in Martian imagery. Without familiar reference objects, trees, buildings, people judging the size of features on Mars becomes challenging. What might appear to be a massive portal could be, and in this case is, merely a small crack when viewed in proper context. NASA scientists emphasized that the opening was barely knee-high to a human adult, an impractical doorway for any imagined Martian civilization. Nevertheless, the psychological impact of such images reveals something profound about our relationship with Mars. Since the 19th century, when astronomer Percival Lowell popularized the notion of Martian canals, the red planet has occupied a special place in human imagination, close enough to seem potentially habitable, yet different enough to host whatever wonders or terrors we might project upon it. The scientific search for life on Mars continues with genuine optimism. Curiosity and its successor, the Perseverance rover, carry instruments specifically designed to detect biosignaturous chemical and physical traces that might indicate past or present microbial life. The ancient lakebed in Gale Crater represents precisely the kind of environment where such life might have evolved billions of years ago, when Mars was warmer and wetter. But there's an unbridgeable gap between the scientific search for microbial biosignatures and the public imagination of doorways, artifacts, and ancient civilizations. This disconnect reveals not scientific ignorance, but something more fundamental about human psychology, or deep-seated hope that we are not alone in the universe, that somewhere beyond Earth, intelligence has arisen as it did here. NASA scientists understand this yearning. Many chose their careers precisely because they share it, yet their response to the doorway image demonstrates the tension between scientific rigor and public engagement. They must simultaneously explain the mundane reality while respecting the wonder that drives public interest in their mission. Dismissing such images too curtly risks alienating a public whose tax dollars fund exploration. Indulging speculative interpretations risks undermining scientific credibility. As imaging technology improves with each mission, we can expect more such discoveries: rocks that resemble sculptures, shadows that suggest structures, formations that hint at design. Each will briefly capture imagination before joining the catalogue of Martian pareidolia. Yet each also serves a valuable purpose, drawing public attention to the ongoing exploration of our planetary neighbor and the genuine mysteries it still holds. The real Mars, a world of dust storms and ancient riverbeds, of polar ice caps and buried glaciers, of extreme temperature swings and radiation-scoured landscape, is more fascinating than any fantasy. Its geological history, recorded in sedimentary layers like those containing the doorway, tells a story of planetary evolution from a potentially habitable world to the cold desert we observe today. Understanding this transformation may provide crucial insights into Earth's own climate future. So while no Martian architects carved the doorway photographed by Curiosity, the formation still offers valuable scientific information about how rocks fracture under Martian conditions. And if, for a brief moment, it allowed us to imagine Moretta wonder what might lie beyond that dark threshold, perhaps that too served a purpose. Exploration has always been fueled by imagination, by the human capacity to look at the unknown and see possibilities. As Curiosity continues its patient journey across Gale Crater, its wheels leaving parallel tracks in the fine red dust, it photographs countless rocks, ridges, and formations. Most will never capture public attention, but occasionally, when the light falls just so, when erosion has shaped stone in particular ways, we might glimpse another doorway, another moment when Mars seems to beckon us towards some deeper understanding. And while science will eventually explain the geological processes behind each such discovery, the wonder they inspire remains valuable. It reminds us why we explore in the first place, not just to confirm what we already know, but to encounter the unexpected, to be surprised, to feel that ancient thrill of standing at a threshold, wondering what lies beyond. The Martian dust continues its eternal dance across the silent sandstone, whispering secrets we strain to hear across the void between worlds. Perhaps there are no doors on Mars. no passages carved by intelligent hands. But the doorway exists nonetheless in our minds, in our questioning, in our persistent hope that somewhere in that rusty landscape we might find a sign that we are not alone in the cosmic night. Until then, each rock and shadow and curious formation serves as both scientific data point and Rorschach test, revealing as much about the observers on Earth as about the distant world we study with such fascination. Missing star. In the quiet depths of our universe, where light travels for years before reaching our telescopes, a peculiar star has been whispering secrets that astronomers cannot quite decipher. KIC 8,462,852, affectionately known as Tabby's star, after astronomer Tabetha Boyajian, who first documented its strange behavior, sits someone 470 light-years away in the constellation Cygnus. Unlike the predictable dimming patterns of most stars, this F-type main-sequence star exhibits irregular and dramatic drops in brightness that defy conventional explanation. The Kepler Space Telescope, during its vigilant watch between 2009 and 2013, captured something unprecedented. Tabby's star would occasionally dim by up to 22%, a staggering amount that would be equivalent to dozens of Jupiter-sized objects passing in front of it. More puzzling still, these dimmings followed no discernible pattern. Sometimes the star would grow fainter for days, other times for weeks. In 2011, its brightness plummeted twice, first by 15%, then later by an astonishing 22%. The cosmos had presented astronomers with a cosmic riddle wrapped in starlight. What could possibly cause such dramatic fluctuations? The first and most natural explanation involves a cloud of comets. Perhaps a family of icy wanderers, disrupted from their orbital slumber, now pass chaotically between us and Tabby's star. As these frozen bodies, with their expansive dust tails, transit across our line of sight, they could temporarily block substantial portions of the star's light. It's a plausible theory, supported by the irregular timing that matches the unpredictable orbits of cometary bodies. Others suggest a field of planetary debris. Perhaps we're witnessing the aftermath of a catastrophic collision between worlds, the shattered remains of planets now orbiting in uneven clouds that occasionally eclipse their parent star. The varying sizes of these fragments would explain the different magnitudes of dimming, while their disorganized orbits would account for the irregular timing. But there was another explanation, one that captured the public imagination like no other. What if we were seeing the signature of an alien megastructure? Could an advanced civilization be building a Dyson swarm, a collection of orbiting solar panels designed to harness their star's energy? Such a project, under construction, might appear to us as precisely the kind of irregular dimming that Kepler observed. The idea spread through scientific communities and popular media alike, transforming a distant stellar anomaly into a tantalizing possibility of first contact. The infrared signature of Tabby's star, however, tells a different story. If large solid objects were blocking the star's light, they would absorb that energy and re-emit it as infrared radiation, a signature that sensitive instruments should detect. Yet observations from NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope revealed no excess infrared emission, dealing a blow to both the planetary debris and megastructure hypotheses. Spectrographic analysis has similarly failed to provide definitive answers. No artificial materials or unexpected elements have been detected in the light passing through whatever obscures the star. The spectrum appears normal for an F-type star, just mysteriously dimmed at unpredictable intervals. In a beautiful marriage of professional astronomy and public enthusiasm, the mystery of Tabby's star sparked one of the largest citizen science projects in recent memory. When Boyajian and her colleagues needed more observational data, they turned to Kickstarter, raising over $100,000 to purchase dedicated telescope time. Thousands of amateur astronomers joined the Where's the Flux project, contributing observations and analysis that professional astronomers alone could never have managed. Recent studies suggest that uneven clouds of dust, rather than solid objects, might be the culprit. Perhaps the star itself expelled this material, or perhaps it's consuming a planet, generating a debris field that occasionally passes between us and its light. Or maybe, just maybe, there's something there we haven't yet imagined. As you drift towards sleep, Imagine those distant photons, traveling for nearly 15 centuries across the void, carrying their encoded mystery. They departed during the fall of the Western Roman Empire and arrived just in time to puzzle our modern astronomers. The light flickers, dims, and brightens again, like a celestial heartbeat pulsing through the drowsy cosmos. Somewhere out there, Tabby's star continues its enigmatic performance, a stellar mystery playing out in cosmic time, indifferent to our curiosity, our theories, or our dreams about what might be circling in its distant orbit. Shrouded face. In a climate-controlled display case within Turin Cathedral's Royal Chapel of the Holy Shroud, protected from light, air, and time itself, lies a simple linen cloth that has become perhaps the most studied and contested religious artifact in human history. The Shroud of Turin, a rectangular piece of herringbone twill fabric measuring approximately 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide, bears the faint, yellowish image of a man's body, front and back, as if the cloth had once wrapped a corpse. The figure appears to have suffered wounds consistent with crucifixion, puncture marks on the head and wrists, scourge marks across the back, and a wound in the side. For millions of faithful Christians, this cloth represents nothing less than the burial shroud of Jesus Christ himself, miraculously imprinted with his image at the moment of resurrection. The documented history of the shroud begins not in 1st century Jerusalem, but in mid-14th century France. Its first verifiable appearance in historical records comes from the small town of Liry around 1355, when a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny displayed it at a local church. How de Charny acquired the cloth remains unknown. He claimed it was a sacred relic, while critics even then suggested it was a clever forgery designed to attract pilgrims and their donations. From Liry, the shroud's journey took it to Chambéry in 1457, where it became the property of the House of Savoy. There it survived a fire in 1532 that left corner burn marks still visible today. In 1578, the Savoy family transferred the relic to their capital of Turin, where it has remained ever since, surviving wars, revolutions, and another fire in 1997 that nearly destroyed the cathedral. The modern scientific examination of the shroud began in 1898, when amateur photographer Secondo Pia took the first photographs of the cloth. In his darkroom, Pia made a startling discovery. The negative image on his photographic plate revealed a much more detailed positive image of a man's face than was visible to the naked eye. This unexpected property, that the shroud image itself functions as a photographic negative, launched a century of intensive scientific investigation. In 1988, after years of negotiation with the Vatican, small samples from the shroud's edge were subjected to radiocarbon dating at 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. Their conclusion was unambiguous. The flax plants used to make the linen died between 1260 and 1390 CE, precisely aligning with the shroud's first historical appearance and seemingly confirming it as a medieval creation. For many, the matter was settled. Yet proponents of the shroud's authenticity quickly identified potential issues with the testing. The sampled area, they argued, came from a corner that had been repaired following the 1532 fire. Medieval reweavers, skilled beyond modern comprehension, might have invisibly introduced newer material that skewed the dating results. Others suggested that a bioplastic coating from centuries of handling, or contamination from the fire itself, could have affected the carbon ratios. Pollen studies have added another layer to the mystery. Botanist Max Frey identified pollen grains embedded in the shroud fibers from plant species native to Jerusalem, Turkey, and France, a distribution consistent with the theorized historical path of the shroud from Jerusalem through Constantinople to Western Europe. However, critics have questioned Frey's methodology and the chain of custody for his samples. The image itself presents perhaps the greatest enigma. No pigments, dyes, or stains have been conclusively identified on the cloth. Instead, The image appears to result from a chemical alteration of the outermost fibrils of the linen threads, affecting them to a depth of only a few micrometers, thinner than a human hair. This superficial nature has led some researchers to propose that the image was created by a burst of radiation or electrical discharge that selectively oxidized the cellulose in the linen. Those skeptical of supernatural origins have proposed various methods by which medieval artisans might have created the image. Some suggest a form of proto-photography, where a corpse or statue coated with light-sensitive chemicals could have left an impression on linen treated with silver compounds. Others propose techniques involving acid etching, heat templates, or natural degradation processes. Renowned art forger Joe Nickel demonstrated that materials available in the 14th century could produce images with similar properties to the shroud. The bloodstains present another puzzle. They appear to be real human blood, type AB, with high bilirubin content suggesting trauma before death. Moreover, the blood was applied before the body image formed, as would be expected in a genuine burial cloth, but would require extraordinary planning from a medieval forger working backward through the process. For the faithful, the shroud represents a genuine miracle, perhaps a burst of divine energy at the moment of resurrection that seared Christ's image onto his burial cloth. For skeptics, it remains an ingenious medieval creation, albeit one whose exact method of manufacture continues to elude complete explanation. For scientists, it presents an interdisciplinary challenge that has advanced techniques in fields from textile analysis to imaging technology. As evening candles flicker in Turin Cathedral, casting gentle shadows across ancient stones, pilgrims still come to gaze upon the faint image visible through bulletproof glass. In the hushed reverence of that space, the shroud's pale face looks back through time, enigmatic, challenging, neither fully proven nor disproven. It hangs suspended between faith and skepticism, between ancient mystery and modern analysis, a ghostly negative image waiting for each viewer to develop their own conclusions in the darkroom of their consciousness. Code in plain sight. On a windswept hilltop in Elbert County, Georgia, a monument of blue granite once stood like an American Stonehenge against the rural landscape. The Georgia Guidestones, erected in March 1980, consisted of 4 massive upright slabs arranged in an X pattern around a central pillar, capped by a rectangular capstone. Standing nearly 20 feet tall and weighing almost 240 pounds, this enigmatic structure appeared seemingly from nowhere, commissioned by a mysterious benefactor using the pseudonym R.C. Christian, a name many believe referenced the founder of Rosicrucianism, Christian Rosenkreuz. The creation of the monument began when a well-dressed stranger walked into the offices of the Elberton Granite Finishing Company in June 1979. He identified himself as representing a small group of loyal Americans who had been planning this monument for 20 years. He selected the Elberton region specifically for its granite, considered among the finest in the world. The company president, Joe Fendley, initially assumed the elaborate request was a practical joke, but a local banker confirmed that Mr. Christian had established an escrow account with significant funds. Construction proceeded with precise specifications and a remarkable attention to astronomical alignment. What transformed these stone pillars from mere curiosity to enduring conspiracy magnet were the messages carved into their faces. On each of the 4 outer stones, the same 10 principles or commandments were inscribed in 8 different languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. The capstone featured shorter inscriptions in 4 ancient languages: Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The first and most controversial of these principles read, "Maintain humanity under 500, 0 in perpetual balance with nature." Other guidelines advocated for reproductive guidance, linguistic unity, wise governance, avoidance of petty laws, balancing personal rights with social duties, and living in harmony with eternal truth. Collectively, they outlined a vision for a drastically reduced global population living in a nature-centered, post-apocalyptic world order. The monument's design incorporated precise astronomical features as well, a center column with a hole drilled through to locate the North Star, a slot aligned with the solstices and equinoxes, and a small aperture in the capstone through which sunlight would designate noon each day. From their dedication in 1980, the guidestones attracted a kaleidoscope of interpretations and conspiracy theories. New Age spiritual seekers viewed them as enlightened wisdom for planetary stewardship. Conspiracy theorists saw them as the published manifesto of a shadowy globalist cabal planning mass depopulation. Some connected them to Freemasonry, noting that the banker who helped arrange their construction, Wyatt Martin, was himself a Mason, though he consistently denied any connection between the monument and the Fraternal Order. Christian religious groups often condemned the stones as pagan or satanic, pointing to their astronomical alignments and the drastic population reduction advocated in the first principle, which would require eliminating over 90% of the world's people. Others saw connections to eugenics movements or population control agendas supposedly promoted by various international organizations. The stones became a Rorschach test for societal anxieties, with interpretations reflecting the fears and hopes of each observer. The true identity of R.C. Christian has remained one of the monument's most enduring mysteries. Banker Wyatt Martin, the only person who knew Christian's real identity, maintained his promise of confidentiality until his death. Various theories have proposed candidates ranging from Ted Turner, the media mogul with environmental interests, to more obscure figures in sustainable development circles. Whoever they were, they successfully created an enduring mystery that outlived the monument itself. In the early morning hours of July 6, 2022, security cameras captured footage of an explosion at the site. Unknown individuals had detonated a device that significantly damaged one of the upright slabs. Hours later, for safety reasons, authorities used heavy equipment to demolish the remaining structure, bringing down what had stood for 42 years. All that remains today are fragments preserved by the Elberton Granite Association and flat concrete markers indicating where the imposing pillars once stood. The destruction of the physical monument has only amplified its place in conspiracy lore. Some suggest the timing, amid global discussions of population and climate, was suspiciously convenient. Others see the demolition itself as fulfillment of an agenda, removing evidence once its purpose was complete. The absence of the stones has created a void that imagination rushes to fill, much as their presence once did. As twilight settles over the bare hilltop, where the guidestones once commanded the horizon, their memory persists in digital archives, documentaries, and countless online forums. The granite is gone, but the questions remain. Who was R.C. Christian? What agenda did the stones really serve? Were they a warning, a plan, or simply an expensive philosophical exercise? Like all powerful mysteries, the Georgia Guidestones continue to echo in the cultural consciousness, their absent silhouette still visible against the darkening sky of our collective imagination. A temple in sound. In the heart of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, where limestone bedrock rises from tropical forests to form the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza, stands the majestic temple of Kukulkan. This stepped pyramid, constructed around 1000 CE, serves as both astronomical calendar and acoustic marvel. When visitors clap their hands at the base of the grand staircase, the stone structure answers with a chirping echo that descends from top to bottom, a sound remarkably similar to the call of the Quetzal bird. Sacred messenger of the gods and embodiment of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity. This acoustic phenomenon remained largely unnoticed by modern archaeologists until the late 1990s, when researchers began systematically documenting and analyzing the site's sonic properties. The effect is most pronounced when standing directly in front of the central staircase. A single handclap produces a chirping echo that begins high in pitch and rapidly descends, lasting approximately 1 second. The sound bears such uncanny resemblance to the Quetzal's call that it seems impossible to attribute to mere coincidence. Acoustic engineers and archaeologists have identified the precise mechanisms creating this sonic signature. The temple's 91 steps, each with a precise height and depth, function as an acoustic diffraction grating. Sound waves from a handclap bounce between the vertical risers and horizontal treads, with the geometry causing specific frequencies to reflect at different rates. The shorter wavelengths, higher pitches, return first, followed by progressively longer wavelengths, lower pitches, creating the distinctive descending chirp. What makes this phenomenon particularly remarkable is that the Quetzal bird was not native to the northern Yucatan. These resplendent creatures, with their emerald plumage and long tail feathers, inhabited the cloud forests of southern Mexico and Guatemala, hundreds of miles from Chichen Itza. For Mayan pilgrims who had never ventured to these distant regions, the temple's echo would have provided their only experience of the sacred bird's call, a divine voice emanating from stone. Recent archaeological studies suggest the acoustic properties were deliberately engineered rather than accidental. Computer modeling of the pyramid's design reveals that even small changes to the staircase dimensions would significantly alter or eliminate the chirping effect. Moreover, researchers have identified acoustic features at other Mayan sites, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of architectural sonics throughout their civilization. At the Great Ball Court in Chichen Itza, a whisper from one end can be clearly heard 500 feet away at the opposite end. While normal conversations in between remain private, an acoustic property that would have seemed magical to participants in ritual games, the ritual significance of these sonic elements continues to be debated. Some scholars propose that Mayan priests used the echo to simulate the presence of Kukulkan during ceremonies, with the disembodied bird call manifesting the deity's voice. Others suggest the sound may have represented the rattlesnake, another form of the feathered serpent god, whose tail makes a similar descending rattle when agitated. In either interpretation, the temple stands as not merely a visual monument but a multisensory instrument for communing with divine forces. This integration of sound and architecture extends beyond Mesoamerica. Along sections of China's Great Wall, specially shaped stones produce musical tones when struck or when rainwater flows across their surfaces. These music stones were carefully selected and placed to create distinct sounds that could communicate messages across vast distances. Similarly, in the hypogeum of Al Saflieni in Malta, a 50-year-old underground temple complex, certain chambers amplify human voices at specific frequencies, transforming whispers into resonant tones that filled the space. For the Maya, sound played a particularly crucial role in rainmaking ceremonies. Their word for rain, hark, was onomatopoeic, mimicking the sound of water falling on leaves. Priests would recreate this sound using rattles and drums, calling to the rain deity through acoustic mimicry. The chirping echo at Kukulkan's temple may have served a similar function, sonically invoking the Quetzal that was associated with fertility and the life-giving rains. Experimental archaeologists have recently attempted to recreate these effects using digital modeling and acoustic analysis. By precisely measuring the dimensions of each step and the properties of the limestone, they can reproduce the chirping echo in virtual environments. These studies confirm that the effect requires extraordinary precision in construction, a testament to the mathematical and architectural sophistication of Mayan engineers working without modern tools or acoustic theory. As tropical night falls over Chichen Itza, when the last tourists have departed and the site returns to stillness, the temple stands silent under stars that once guided Mayan astronomers. The jungle chorus rises, insects buzzing, night birds calling, distant howler monkeys marking their territory. And perhaps, in that symphony of natural sounds, the stone-born whistle of the Quetzal still echoes faintly down the ancient staircase, a voice preserved in architecture, calling across centuries to those who know how to listen. The Temple of Kukulkan reminds us that our ancestors built not just for the eye, but for the ear, creating spaces where sound itself became a bridge between the mortal and divine realms, where architecture could give voice to absent gods in a temple constructed not just of stone, but of carefully shaped sound. Unfinished message. In a weathered pamphlet published in 1885, a strange tale unfolded that would launch one of America's most enduring treasure hunts. According to the anonymous author, a man named Thomas Jefferson Beale had arrived in Lynchburg, Virginia, in January 1820, carrying locked iron boxes containing 3 coded messages. Beale entrusted these papers to a local innkeeper named Robert Morris, with instructions to open them only if Beale or his associates failed to return within 10 years. When no one claimed the mysterious ciphers, Morris eventually broke the seals, finding only indecipherable strings of numbers that would come to be known as the Beale ciphers. The pamphlet claimed that Beale and 30 companions had discovered a magnificent treasure while mining in the American Southwest, gold and silver worth over 23 million in today's currency. They transported this immense wealth to Bedford County, Virginia, and buried it in a secret location. The 3 encrypted documents supposedly contained the precise coordinates of the treasure, a detailed inventory of the buried riches, and a list of the men's names and heirs who should receive shares of the fortune. But Morris, despite years of effort, could not crack the numerical codes. It was only decades later, according to the pamphlet, that a friend of Morris managed to decipher the second paper. The breakthrough came through an ingenious method, using the Declaration of Independence as the key. Each number in the cipher corresponded to the first letter of the word in that position in the declaration. Thus, the number 8 referred to instituted, so the 8th word in the cipher translated to I. Working through this painstaking process revealed a message describing the treasure. I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Beaufort's, in an excavation or vault 6 feet below the surface of the ground. The decrypted text continued with a detailed inventory: over 900 pounds of gold, 100 pounds of silver, and jewels obtained from St. Louis worth 13.0 in 1,820 currency. The message concluded with the tantalizing assertion that the first cipher contained the exact location, if only someone could decode it. Yet despite the successful translation of the second document, the first and third ciphers have resisted all attempts at decryption for nearly 2 centuries. The treasure, if it exists, remains hidden somewhere in the verdant hills of Bedford County. Countless treasure hunters have scoured the Blue Ridge foothills since the pamphlet's publication. The search has claimed lives, bankrupted families, and consumed careers. In the 1980s, one determined seeker spent $1 million on excavation equipment and land rights before abandoning his quest. Others have employed everything from divining rods to ground-penetrating radar in their efforts to locate the vault. The Bedford County countryside bears the scars of these expeditions: abandoned test pits, half-collapsed tunnels, and the occasional grave of a treasure hunter who perished in pursuit of Beale's elusive gold. Cryptographic analysis has both supported and undermined the cipher's authenticity. Statistical patterns in the numbers suggest they were not randomly generated but follow linguistic frequencies consistent with English text. However, modern cryptographers note several suspicious elements. The successful decoding of the second cipher using the Declaration of Independence seems almost too convenient. It was a well-known document that many Americans could access. Moreover, the version of the declaration used as the key contains subtle differences from the ones in common circulation during Beale's time, suggesting a later creation date. Historical inconsistencies further complicate the mystery. No record of a Thomas Jefferson Beale exists in Virginia during the relevant period. The pamphlet mentions mining in New Mexico in 1817, yet the territory was still under Spanish control then, with minimal American presence. The massive quantity of gold described would have represented an implausibly large percentage of all gold mined in the United States before the California gold rush. Some researchers suggest the entire story may have been fabricated by the pamphlet's anonymous author, widely believed to be James B. Ward, a Lynchburg businessman with a flair for puzzle-making. Yet the allure persists. The partial decoding of one cipher suggests a genuine encryption rather than nonsense characters. If the treasure tale was merely a hoax, why create 3 separate ciphers and provide a genuine key for only one? The complexity seems excessive for a simple deception. And the second cipher's decryption, while perhaps conveniently achieved, does produce coherent text with specific details rather than vague promises. Modern approaches to the unsolved ciphers have employed advanced computing techniques, including machine learning algorithms trained to recognize patterns in historical ciphers. Some researchers have explored alternative key texts, theorizing that the first cipher might use the Constitution or Virginia's Declaration of Rights rather than the Declaration of Independence. Others have suggested that the numerical sequences might represent a different encoding method entirely, perhaps a book cipher, using a volume that has been lost to history. As moonlight filters through oak branches in the rolling Bedford County landscape, casting dappled shadows across fields where generations have searched in vain, the Beale treasure remains as elusive as ever. The ciphers, whether genuine encryptions or elaborate hoax, continue to whisper their unfinished message across time. Somewhere in this quiet Virginia countryside, beneath the roots of ancient trees or hidden in some forgotten cave, either millions in gold and silver lie waiting to be discovered, or nothing at all rests beneath the soil, except the buried dreams of countless treasure hunters who followed Thomas Jefferson Beale's cryptic breadcrumbs into the labyrinth of an unsolved American mystery. An island of silence. Off the eastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal meets the Andaman Sea, lies a small, densely forested island ringed by coral reefs and pristine beaches. North Sentinel Island, part of India's Andaman archipelago, measures barely 28 square miles, smaller than Manhattan, yet contains a world entirely its own. What distinguishes this island from its neighbors is not its geography but its inhabitants. The Sentinelese people, numbering perhaps between 50 and 200 individuals, represent one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. Having maintained their isolation through deliberate rejection of outside contact for thousands of years. The island itself appears unremarkable from a distance, a flat, forested landmass surrounded by turquoise waters. Its beaches of white sand quickly give way to dense tropical jungle dominated by evergreen trees and Andaman redwoods. Coconut palms line the coast, while fresh water is available from small streams that cross the island. The surrounding coral reefs create a natural barrier, with treacherous underwater rocks making approach by boat dangerous for all but the most experienced navigators familiar with the local waters. This natural isolation has been reinforced by official protection. The Indian government recognizes North Sentinel as sovereign territory of its indigenous inhabitants, prohibiting any approach within 3 nautical miles of its shores. Satellite imagery and distant observation are the only approved methods of monitoring the island. This policy of non-interference emerged after early contact attempts in the 1960s and 1970s proved disastrous, with visiting anthropologists and officials facing hostile reception from islanders defending their territory with bows and arrows. The most comprehensive documentation of the Sentinelese came from anthropologist Triloknath Pandit, who led several expeditions near the island between 1967 and 1991. During one peaceful encounter in 1991, islanders actually approached Pandit's boat to collect coconuts offered as gifts. However, such moments of cautious acceptance have been rare exceptions to their general pattern of forcefully rejecting outside presence. 2 tragic incidents in recent decades have underscored both the islanders' determination to maintain isolation and the ethical complexities surrounding their protected status. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen whose boat drifted onto the island's shore while they slept were killed by Sentinelese arrows. Indian authorities did not prosecute the islanders, recognizing the action as defense of sovereign territory. More recently, in November 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow was killed while attempting to reach the island illegally to convert its inhabitants to Christianity. His body was never recovered, and his death reignited global debate about the ethics of enforced isolation versus self-determined seclusion. From a linguistic perspective, the Sentinelese represent a profound mystery. Their language remains completely undocumented and unclassified. While other indigenous Andaman languages belong to the Ongan or Great Andamanese families, we cannot determine whether Sentinelese relates to either group or constitutes its own linguistic isolate. During brief encounters, observers have noted that their speech patterns differ significantly from those of nearby tribes, suggesting long separation from other Andaman populations. Genetic studies of neighboring Andamanese groups offer tantalizing clues about the Sentinelese origins. Other Andaman Islanders represent some of the oldest and most isolated human populations outside Africa, having separated from mainland Asian populations perhaps 30 years ago. Their genetic profiles show links to the earliest human migrations out of Africa, preserving genetic markers largely disappeared elsewhere in Asia. It seems likely the Sentinelese share this ancient lineage, potentially representing one of the purest examples of Paleolithic human society surviving into the modern era. The material culture observable from distance suggests a hunter-gatherer lifestyle unchanged for millennia. The Sentinelese fashion outrigger canoes from hollowed tree trunks, but these craft appear suited only for fishing in the island's lagoons rather than open sea travel. They use bows and arrows tipped with hardwood, bone, or scavenged metal. Their dwellings consist of temporary-looking lean-to structures rather than permanent villages, suggesting they may move seasonally around the island following food sources. Notably absent are any signs of agriculture or animal domestication beyond the most rudimentary level. What knowledge do the Sentinelese possess that remains unknown to the outside world? Ethnobotanists speculate they likely maintain sophisticated understanding of medicinal plants found nowhere else. Their isolation may have preserved oral histories and mythologies, providing unique perspectives on human consciousness and social organization. Their immune systems, never exposed to common global pathogens, might offer insights into human immunology. Yet, accessing such knowledge would require contact that could simultaneously destroy the very culture being studied and potentially cause catastrophic disease transmission to a population with no resistance to outside illnesses. This paradox defines the ethical frontier of anthropological knowledge. Some information can only be obtained through intervention that would irrevocably alter or destroy its source. The right of the Sentinelese to determine their own fate has, in modern consensus, superseded scientific curiosity. We know they have survived tsunamis, colonization attempts, Japanese occupation during World War II, and the massive changes to surrounding islands. Their resilience suggests sophisticated adaptive strategies developed through millennia of isolation. From recovered artifacts and rare photographs, anthropologists have gleaned limited insights into Sentinelese life. Women appear to wear minimal clothing consisting of leaf or fiber strands around the waist, while men often wear only ornamental headbands or necklaces. Both genders decorate their bodies with distinctive white or red patterns, possibly made from clay or crushed coral. Their arrows feature multiple types of heads, some designed for fishing, others for hunting or defense. Sentinelese have been observed harvesting turtle eggs and honey, gathering fallen fruit, and hunting small game in the island's interior. Perhaps most remarkably, the Sentinelese have selectively adapted elements from occasional shipwrecks or flotsam. They have incorporated scavenged metal into tools and weapons, while rejecting other introduced materials. After the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which partially submerged portions of their island, helicopter surveys observed islanders firing arrows upward at the aircraft, evidence both of their continued wariness and their survival of the catastrophic event that claimed thousands of lives across the region. The philosophical questions surrounding North Sentinel Island extend beyond anthropology into ethics, sovereignty, and human rights. Does isolation represent imprisonment or freedom? What responsibilities do technologically advanced societies have toward those who reject contact? If climate change eventually threatens the island's habitability, what interventions would be justified? These questions have no easy answers, particularly when communication with those most affected remains impossible. As global connectivity reaches even the most remote corners of our planet, North Sentinel Island remains a rare exception, a place where human beings have maintained an unbroken connection to a pre-industrial, pre-agricultural way of life that characterized most of our species' existence. In an age where privacy has become increasingly scarce, the Sentinelese have defended theirs with lethal determination. Their message, delivered without words but through consistent action, seems clear: leave us alone. As the gentle waves of the Andaman Sea wash against North Sentinel's shores, they mark a boundary more profound than mere geography. On one side stands our interconnected, documented world. On the other, a society that has chosen to remain apart, whose language we will likely never translate, whose customs we will never fully understand. In respecting their silence, we acknowledge that not all human knowledge is ours to possess, that some voices prefer to remain unheard by any ears but their own. The island stands as a reminder that sometimes wisdom lies not in discovery but in restraint, allowing others to exist beyond the reach of our understanding, undisturbed by our curiosity, sheltered by nothing more than distance and our belated respect for their choice to remain apart from our world, yet complete within their own.